call the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee to order. It's Thursday, October 8th, 2020, and it is, sorry, I can't see my watch, 6:01 p.m. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, MGLC 30A, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through high expectations and cooperation, resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. The first item on our agenda is public comment. And the first public comment is coming from Julia Bowen on item 6A, and I need to call her, so I will do that.
This is Julia.
Hi, Julia. It's the Mount Greylock School Committee. We're ready for your public comment.
Great, thank you. I'm Julia Bowen. I'm calling from Williamstown, and I'm speaking to the item on the agenda under Superintendent's Update for DEI. Actually, also really just calling in with an invitation. So on behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI, working group of the Mount Greylock Regional School, MGRS, this is a mouthful, School Council, I'm writing to invite you, the members of our school committee, and anyone listening who is interested, to what we are calling a DEI convening to discuss current and future efforts in the areas of DEI at Mount Greylock. This convening will be held on Tuesday, October 13th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. on Zoom. The agenda and sign-in instructions have been posted on the district calendar. In addition to student groups who engage in DEI efforts, we have sent this invitation to the Williamstown-based community groups engaged in DEI work. We are also interested in having participation from Lanesboro community members who may be interested in advancing the cause of DEI at the middle and high school. The MGRSD School Council is a committee made up of students, teachers, parents, community members, and the principal, whose purpose includes developing and supporting the implementation of a school improvement plan for the middle and high school. In each of the last 2 years, the school improvement plan has included a goal to support the continued growth of a truly inclusive school culture, where all school community members feel they have a voice and that they belong. The DEI working group was formed last spring to focus specifically on this goal. Embedded in our goal for 2021 is an effort to build strong partnerships with individuals and organizations whose perspectives and experience will enhance our work. We're planning this DEI convening to launch this effort and engage as many people as possible in our discussion. Going forward, we hope that representatives of aligned school and community committees and student clubs will join our working group's regular meetings, ensuring that we continue to benefit from a diverse and representative set of perspectives. We anticipate our discussion on October 13th to include an overview of efforts already underway at the middle high school to support a more inclusive environment, a review of our DEI goal for the 2021 school year, and an open conversation to hear ideas from participants on how else to achieve our ultimate goal of a truly inclusive school community. If anyone is unable to attend but would like to attend in the future, they should email me at jgb275@gmail.com. And again, the meeting information has been posted on the district calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Okay, our next public comment is on agenda number 9, and it's from Stephanie Boyd, who I believe is from Williamstown, but I don't have that in front of me. Is she from Williamstown?
Yes.
Thank you. Dear School Committee, I want to start by saying thank you for your commitment to our community. I know that all of you are striving to do what you think is best for our community. I do not doubt your intentions. On the other hand, I can understand how in the thick of trying to resolve complex issues, we can sometimes lose sight of where we are going. It can take a variety of voices and viewpoints to keep us heading in the in the right direction. Regardless of where we come out on the decision related to turf fields, the process we engage to make the decision is extremely important. At the end of the day, when responding to people who don't agree with whatever decision will ultimately be made, being able to point to a robust, inclusive, thorough process will be the only defensible position the committee will have. Despite what I feel has been a failure to adequately evaluate and express the athletic program needs, incorporate environmental impact assessment into the design, and conduct a reasonable financial analysis comparing various options, I am mostly dismayed with what appears at this moment to me to be a lack of integrity on behalf of the school committee. Several times the committee made commitments to the community and to process and then seemingly ignored them. Last night I went through various iBerkshire articles to track down promises made by the school committee over the past year or so. In response to concerns expressed by numerous community members, the town's finance committees and select boards related to the expense and impact of a proposed artificial turf field, the school committee committed to gather more information, September 29th, to hold a public forum, January 2020, to form an advisory committee, June 2020. Currently, the school committee seems to be indicating that none of these promised initiatives are necessary, and there is a need to move forward quickly. While many things have changed in our world since June, it is hard to fathom what would compel the school committee to spend $2.5 million without the due diligence they previously thought was important. If anything, financial pressures and changing priorities due to the realities of COVID-19 should encourage us to pause and reevaluate this significant decision. It certainly feels like the decision is trying to be pushed through without the appropriate due diligence, because in a few short weeks there will be 4 new people on the committee. I am more than happy to discuss these issues at any time. Best, Stephanie. Included in her comment are excerpts from iBerkshire's articles. And the last comment is from Hugh Daly of Williamstown on item number 9. Chair Conry, I noticed an item on the agenda for fields with a potential vote expected. While I'm not able to attend tonight's meeting, I'm hopeful the committee will be prudent and deliberate in its decision making. With regards to the fields, I wholeheartedly support the Title IX improvements. In light of recent budget issues and the budget issues to come, I believe the best course of action is to do the work you have to do only. This does mean that installation of a turf field should not be undertaken at this time. As I'm sure you know, anything that distracts from the core mission of educating our children should be avoided. The limited amount of bandwidth from staff and the community should be focused on our collective core mission only. Please don't get distracted. I will note that I'm still hopeful the committee will establish the building maintenance fund we are all expecting. The Board of Selectmen of Lanesboro and Williamstown and the Finance Committee of Williamstown have asked you to make good on this commitment. Please do so. Thank you for your service. Sincerely, Hugh Daly. Okay. Next up on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the September 10th, 2020 minutes?
Miller, I will so move.
Miller moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Terranova seconds. Any discussion?
Yes, I have discussion on all 3. So for the first one on page 3, I just wanted to expand my comment to say when S. Miller recommended making our own community statement and then add, as posting a BLM sign could open up the district to posting requests from other groups.
Okay.
Because this is what actually happened later.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approval of minutes of the September 10th minutes with that addition?
Can we just say aye?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aye.
No, do we have to do roll call?
No.
Oh, no, we don't, that's right.
I can just look around the room.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
fantastic.
Aye.
Aye. Al, did you say aye?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Those minutes are approved. Do I have a motion to approve the September 15th, 2020 minutes?
Miller, I'll so move.
Miller moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Carter seconds. Any discussion?
Yes, another addition. given how close we came to losing in-person instruction, I think it's worth putting in the minutes the discussion we had back then. So when it says discussion among school committee members, including concerns about the state metrics and getting students into school, I would like to add, Miller warns that if the district uses the state color code, then 5 people testing positive in week 1, 0 in week 2, 5 in week 3, and 0 in week 4 will move the entire district to remote. And then it should just say, I think explicitly, that the motion I made was not seconded.
Okay. Any other discussion on those?
So is that wording in the video?
It is essentially, yes.
So the person who does the minutes can go back to the video and look
Yes.
for that? Okay.
I mean, this may not be word for word, but this was the example I gave with, 5050.
Mhm.
And the more expansive one gets us to 11 weeks, but I did not do that calculation.
Okay, all in favor of the September 15th minutes with that addition?
I,
Aye.
Karen,
Okay, that passes. Do I have a motion to approve the September 24th, 2020 minutes?
Miller, I will so move.
Miller moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Carter seconds. Further discussion?
And then I think there was something cut off on the top of page 4. I think this was from something that Rob was doing. I had a possible suggestion. I just-
Are we waiting for Rob?
Right.
I don't think it was cut off. I think it was just, there are 2 points being made.
It just says complications from posting of signs on school grounds, raising.
I think the raising should just be deleted.
Okay, that's fine. Just when you have the raising there, it seems like something was falling.
There. Okay.
Right.
The top of 4.
Top, right.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. So are we okay with
Yeah,
that?
either we
We're
move
just
raising or add
removing-
something after
Yeah, I
that.
think we're removing raising. Okay.
I think it would be better to put after that, what the complication is, that it raises, it opens up other groups who want their message displayed, just to be explicit in the minutes as to why we did what we did. But I'm fine either way.
Thoughts?
I think just eliminating raising
think
is
just-
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works. Okay, so all in favor with that change?
Aye.
Right.
Aye. Okay.
We're not doing alphabetical order anymore?
No, we're
No,
all
we can
here, so
actually-
we don't have to
Just
do that.
Blare it out.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, September 24th minutes are passed.
I like
Yeah.
alphabetical order.
You do? It's very orderly, that's for sure. Okay, next up on the agenda are chair reports. And we have a school committee member letter of resignation from Regina DeLago. She's one of our Lanesboro representatives. This is dated October 3rd. Christina, it is with mixed emotions that I am resigning from the Mount Greylock Regional School Committee effective immediately. For 20 years, I have served the children and residents of my district with strong commitment of meeting the educational needs of children in the best and most responsible manner possible. I honored my commitment to see through the regionalization.
Wait,
Work-
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got a message that WillieNet is only showing a blank YouTube page.
Okay.
Just-
Technical difficulties on the screen, but we are recording.
Okay.
And working on it.
Okay.
I honored my commitment to see through regionalization, work towards the blending of the district, negotiating the many contracts into unified documents, continuing the Mount Greylock building project, and working to get appropriate workspace for our administration. The time commitment has been phenomenal, but the end results were worth the investment. I now find that it is no longer the case for me, and the commitment is not balanced out. For me, it is no longer a positive experience, nor is it sufficiently about children and education. It is time for me to walk away. I wish you all well. Sincerely, Regina DeLago. And I would like to personally thank Regina for her dedication and work for the district over her many years on the school committee. Regionalization and all that's cropped up over the last 2 years has been very challenging. While the community doesn't necessarily see all the work behind the scenes that the committee performs, Regina's contributions have been amazing, and I'd just like to thank Regina. I don't know if anyone else has other comments before I move into what the next process.
I would second that sentiment. It's been clear for years just how devoted she has been to the students and the families and the district as a whole, and it was wonderful to have her advocacy for years.
Okay, so I just wanted to read the next steps when we have a school committee member who leaves within their term, according to our regional agreement statement on vacancy. If a vacancy occurs among the committee members elected under Section 5 or appointed under Section 5B1, the selectmen from both Lanesboro and Williamstown will meet together at the Mount Greylock Regional School within 30 calendar days, with the remaining committee members to fill such vacancy by roll call vote. A majority of the votes of the elected officials entitled to vote shall be necessary to such election. The newly appointed committee member will serve until the next biennial state election, at which election a successor shall be elected to serve for the balance of the unexpired term, if any. This joint meeting will be chaired by the town moderator of the town of residence for the new appointee, and the joint meeting's chairperson will vote only resolved tied votes. So the reason why I read this is it's sort of important because the timing is unusual. So central office reached out to DESE regarding the vacancy because of the timing. It basically happens right before our next biennial election. And essentially the contact said, the DESE contact said they hadn't really experienced this particular chain of events in the timing and suggested that we reach out to the state. So that was done, and the response from that office was that any resignations after April would lead to appointment until the next biennial election, which means this appointment will be a 2-year appointment through November of 2022. So at this time, our central office is posting the position, and will reach out to the Lanesboro town moderator, who is Chris Dodig, and begin coordinating the joint meetings between the school committee and the 2 town select boards. Any questions on that?
What if we don't get nominated?
That is a good question, and I don't have an answer for that.
Can we run with 6 committee members?
What's that?
Can we run with 6 committee members?
Sure. Yeah, but how do we promote it? I mean, what's the best way to promote that the position is open and we would like people to consider, applying for it?
It's a good question. And in the past, I mean, how did you find out? What motivated you? I feel like you and Jamie were the closest to having experienced this.
Yeah,
Was
I mean,
it just
word
word
gets
of
around
mouth?
quickly,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
contacted me and said, would you please consider? And I've already actually done that with a couple of people in
Okay.
Lanesboro. Would you please consider? So I do think that's the best
Yeah.
way to do it is
Yeah.
to just contact people that you.
Talking about it now, we'll get it into the newspapers, maybe an announcement in the stuff we sent home, the weekly newsletters there as well.
Right. And the application or the position, that goes on the school committee portion of the website. It's not in School Spring, which I think is an important distinction, that it's under our sort of tab on
It's
the
in
website.
the school committee tab.
Yeah.
Or you could always email Stacy and she could send the application.
What are you thinking in terms of timing, Christina?
Well, because it's 30 days, and it's October. Her resignation was October 3rd, so it has to happen before November 3rd. So you see why the timing was really
Yeah.
So, at this point, it's sort of Stacy will start communicating with all of the parties involved so we can figure out when we can all get together, you know, the majority of us can all get together and
Would that be a
and review.
virtual meeting?
I would assume so, yeah, because of the sheer number of people. I don't think we could get everyone safely into one space.
Okay.
So is the idea probably we'll give a couple weeks for applications and then meet late October?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So the Lanesboro PTO would be, right, what, is that the parent group at Lanesboro Elementary?
Yeah.
Should reach out to them if someone hasn't done that already.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll put
And
that as an
then
action
the
item.
PTO at Mount Greylock, and any other groups where parents are actively involved. And then word should get out. It's already actually been in iBerkshire's, the resignation,
Right,
so.
right.
You know,
I mean,
just
I
sharing
found
on
out years
social-
ago from a radio ad, or a radio story, just talking about an opening.
Okay, anything else on that? Okay, so the next item up is the anti-racism resolution. And if you remember in June, or rather back in July, we read the COVID-19 funding resolution. This resolution was provided at the same time, but we admittedly were very focused on the time-sensitive need for funding at that time. So this is particularly critical now as we have moved back into in-person learning and want all our students to feel safe. So I'm going to read the resolution. It is the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee Anti-Racism Resolution.
Want a break from reading?
If somebody else wants to read it, that would be
Happy to read it.
fantastic. Thank you, Carrie.
Okay. So yes, the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee Anti-Racism Resolution, which is also, the resolution is being put forward by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and will be voted on as a resolution at the Delegate Assembly in November. Whereas, as schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil right of obtaining a free and appropriate public education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming community for all students. And whereas it is the responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we as school district leaders can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolved, that Mount Greylock Regional School District and all the school districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, families, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist, that acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Respectfully, the Mount Greylock School Committee.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to support the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee Anti-Racism Resolution?
So moved.
I don't know who had that. We'll say Carter moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Art seconds. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is this language being used across the state, or is there?
Yes.
I 100% support signing this. I would have liked to see it include an explicit statement about developing DEI skills in students, not just staff. It incorporates working on the curriculum and reading works from diverse perspectives, professional development for district staff. But I would really like to see us have active programs specifically for students and working on those skills as well. I think it, roundabout is in here, but I hope that that's something that we can look at going forward as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I can bring that up at the delegate assembly.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. That resolution passes. Okay, next up on our agenda are superintendent updates.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I have two updates, or two topics. The first being diversity, equity, inclusion, and internal and community-related issues. There is much I don't know about the Mount Greylock community, so I have been very grateful that community groups and individuals have reached out to provide me with much needed background information and invite me to community events. And I wanted to make a statement to say that I have not gone to these events not for any other reason than all the sort of the exigencies of reopening school, which have prevented me from focusing more intensely on these important issues. Another issue that I have been, while I've been getting information from different groups involved with DEI and also of police presence in the schools, what I have done is that these require a sustained, meaningful focus, and the brevity of my tenure in the district prevents that type of focus. But what I have done is I've reached out to Dr. McCandless, who will be assuming the leadership of the district during the first week of November. And I've shared every communications I have received in regard to these issues, I have shared with him. And Dr. McCandless was particularly thankful for the historical context of the efforts in regard to ensuring diversity in Mount Greylock Regional School District and the efforts that have been made on that behalf. These efforts have been the guiding principle and passion throughout Dr. McCandless's career. He's eager to take up and sustain the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative upon his arrival, and he has been in contact already with folks who have been spearheading this information. In fact, during this meeting, I texted him about the October 13th event that was just announced by Julia Bowen, and he already had responded to her, looking forward to participation in that. Also, Dr. McCandless, in regard to the issues having to do with police presence in school, has had extensive experience with police liaisons in both Pittsfield Public Schools and in his former position in the Lee Public Schools. And he is really best suited to provide detailed accounts of actual day-to-day interactions of police officers with students and parents in and around the schools, the purposes that police liaisons best serve in his experience in schools, and other kinds of resources that might be deployed to ensure the safety and mentoring of our students. So he's looking forward to engaging in both of these conversations and much, much more. His extensive experience, and I believe it's 16 or 17 years as a superintendent, and of different types of communities also. He was the superintendent of Lee, which was of course a very small district, and now Pittsfield. So he's looking forward to engaging in these tremendously important issues. And he said, it was actually just in talking to him, he said he's particularly interested because these are the core issues that brought him into education and the things he thinks are the most important things to engage with as we move forward. So that is my what I wanted to update on that. The other thing I want to update is on our reopening to date. I had told the principals and actually all the administrators that they didn't have to attend this evening for this update, didn't put their names on the agenda, because we are going to have an October 22nd meeting focused entirely on education, and of course the Education Subcommittee before that. And so I thought that it would be best for me to give a brief description of what's been happening in currently our 3 days of hybrid learning that's happened so far, just to give you a brief taste of what's going on, with an expectation that the October 22nd meeting will be much more detailed. But this is more of a snapshot to give you a sense of where we are. So, at the Lanesboro Elementary School, Nolan put together a couple of things in terms of successes and challenges. The kind of things he thought about successes, he's quickly getting students into the building that have filled out the screener. That the students, one of the things that he's remarked on, and this is everyone has remarked on, the ease and expertise of mask wearing demonstrated by the students. There have been, I personally have walked through all of the elementary classrooms during this week, and I can tell you quite frankly that they are, the students, kindergarten, actually preschool all the way through 6th grade, are actually better at wearing masks than I've seen many adults demonstrate. They actually, and they do it without problem for the entire course that they're in school. And he remarked about that. He also remarked upon the power of the small class sizes. As I walked through all of the classes, not only in Lanesboro Elementary, but also at Williamstown, it's remarkable to see anywhere between 4 to 6 to 10 students in the classroom. And I will tell you that they are deeply engaged in the work that they're doing. Also, there are other things, that the inventive ways to teach within the parameters that we are faced by our social distancing. That's another thing. One of the challenges, he said, which is something that we're working on, is asynchronous learning and time out of the building. Those are the things that are the big challenges. At Mount Greylock, Jake has reported that both cohorts of hybrid students have successfully experienced a full day of in-building learning. He's impressed with the students, staff, and families. The mantra of the school, the Greylock way, is obvious, he says. It's not hard to notice where everywhere he turns, he sees and feels the after effects of people demonstrating integrity, responsibility, and perseverance. The appropriate and most effective balance between synchronous and asynchronous learnings continues to develop. This is a challenge, and it's going to take a while to figure out how this happens, but I believe we're working in that direction. The flow of students into the building between classes and during lunch is getting smoother. If you really think about it, we have not been at it for very long, and I think it's going to improve as we go. Mount Greylock continues to seek suggestions and assess their procedures and refine practices and make necessary adjustments. The process doesn't happen overnight. He appreciates the feedback, flexibility, and patience. Jake always likes to take an opportunity for reminders, of course. And he said, reminders, families, please remember to complete the student self-assessment health screener every day, Monday through Friday, for each student. So whether you're remote or hybrid. So that actually goes for all schools. And also, school photos, October 20 and 22nd. More info will follow in an email. Jake takes every opportunity he has. Now at West, there are students, Kristen has reported the return of students in the building has been exactly what they needed. Seeing their faces, even though masked, hearing the voices and feeling some of the normal hustle and bustle in the building has reminded everybody why we do this, what we're working towards. The arrival and dismissal has been getting easier every day as families are adjusting to the new procedures. We're having some trouble with families not filling out the screeners. I told you this would be a theme as we go along. And this has caused some delays, but it's getting easier. I actually visited, Kristen has been visiting classrooms, and I visited with her on Tuesday. We made it to all of the classrooms, and students, she remarks, have expressed the utmost appreciation for being back in the building, and the teachers, of course, are more than happy to have them there. Teachers are taking advantage of the weather, and many of the classes having real read-alouds and lessons outside, in addition to their socially distant mask breaks. Basically, successes, social distancing protocols. The kids are doing great. Mask wearing. Symptom screening is going better. Refining procedures. Lots of smiles. In-person learning is wonderful. And students report this is different, but feels more normal than I expected. The areas to improve, of course, again, asynchronous learning and login hurdles. These are some of the things. Patrick Priester was reporting on special education, saying that there are quite a number of successes. Students are reorienting themselves to the in-person learning. Meetings and evaluations have begun, and remote sped teacher is being introduced to new caseload. The challenges, of course, screen time balance, remote learning for K-2 students and students with executive functioning issues, and the 7th grade transition. We'll go into more detail, but this is, again, a snapshot of what it's like the first 4 days of the implementation of our hybrid model. Now, both Joelle and Ellie have also working on addressing some of these needs with the technology and professional development. They are offering, basically they're offering professional development that deals with such things as, what are you doing with your asynchronous time? What is working well for you about it? Beyond assigning Lexia, IXL, and the like, what sort of learning tasks are you offering students? If you're assigning social studies or science, how do you create forums for discussions among students? In other words, everybody recognizes that we've been at remote learning for basically, there were 18 days, and now we're in hybrid, which includes remote, and that there's going to have to be continuous improvement in the work that teachers are doing in order to reach all students. And that essentially is my thumbnail of what's been going on. Yes?
Can you tell us anything about how the remote academy is going?
Yes, the remote academy, there are, essentially we're still working. I think that everybody, Joelle has reached out and actually dropped off materials to each of the households of the folks that are doing this. It is, from my general sense of it, it started on Monday. And so that the idea is that, but prior to that, the students had been assigned to their classrooms, the classrooms that they were assigned to at the very beginning of the year. They have all made the transition into the remote academy. And basically things are moving along, but it's a transition from the remote that was happening before. And the teachers are actually taking 2 grade levels. And I think everybody's getting up to speed with it. But I can tell you that with our next report, there's going to be a more in-depth report, because I intend to have survey data from parents that specifically asks questions about how is remote learning going. Basically, I've got to craft this thing, but we have to get to that. And also, how parent and student perceptions of the hybrid model.
Steve?
And then just talking about reopening, I know one of the concerns the community had when we were considering reopening and having students back in the buildings was what would happen when the Williams students returned. And I think it's worth just stating what those numbers are, that there's been over 19,000 tests since August 17th, almost 4,000 in the last 7 days, and only 5 positive tests from the Williams community. And so I know that this was a concern a lot of people had, and it's great to hear that the numbers are this low, where actually we're at the realm where some of these might actually be false positives by the laws of statistics.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have any children, and I'm not put my colleagues under the bus there or anything, but my children aren't coming to school here anymore. And if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. How is that going from your point of view as a parent? I mean, I wake up from this. What is it like getting 3 kids or 2 kids ready at 6:30 in the morning? Well, if you don't want to answer, I don't want to put you on the spot. But I just wonder what that's like.
There's one enormous positive that I'm happy to say is that for our kids at Mount Greylock, it means they can get up a little bit later. And so that has been very useful for a lot of things. It's been a challenge, especially if the internet is not working well in the house and many people have to be on at the same time. It's going to take a while for teachers to find out what is the right amount of work to give so that people have something meaningful to do when they go off on their own. It's a process.
I'll just share something. I talked to my grandson, who started kindergarten in North Carolina, and he thinks that this is the way school is. He's really excited. He thinks everyone, that's the way you go to school, you win this. Anyway, I don't know if anyone else wants to say, because I have no contact.
I can speak just from my perspective with two in elementary school. My kids are so thrilled to be back in school. They're just, from a social emotional perspective, really happy. My first grader told me today she was doing their last assignment of the day was a check-in. How was your day? And she said, "This is the best day of my life." And I was like, "Are you like, maybe this is the best day of your life?" I don't know, but she's just, every day she says, "I love spending time with my teacher and my friends." And everything seems to be running really smoothly at Wes. I've been really, really impressed. And I think the challenges, just as a parent, are the asynchronous learning the other half of the day, which feels more like last spring than like remote was for the first 2 weeks of school. And that's
Wait, sorry,
tricky.
feels more like what?
Last spring.
Last spring. Oh.
Because they don't have their teachers. Like during the remote learning, even though they were on Zoom, the teachers were doing an incredible job engaging the students and working together. But they're with the other half of their class in that chunk of the day. So then the little ones come home and they need help working through all their things. And so that's how it feels kind of like it was before.
Are they engaged with specialists when they're home? Are they still in classes?
They are, but it's a brief part. I mean,
Okay.
they, like, for the morning session, the pickup is at 11:10, and they have an hour break, and then the whole, the specialist is 20 minutes or something.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of, they break the day down, but it's still, the kids still need someone there, the learning coach type person, to get through it, which is challenging. And I also one of my kids also has some experience with the remote academy, and that also seems to be he's really happy with that as well. Just seems, I've been really impressed with the work the staff has done to make this work for everyone.
Actually, to follow up on that in terms of, best day of my life, one of my friends told me that his son was hovering over the computer, hitting refresh, waiting to see what color the map was going to be. And just, breaking out in joy. I get to go to school!
Go ahead.
I would like to volunteer another parent to talk about his experience also.
Oh.
I would like to volunteer another parent who has 3 children in school of the district, Mr. Bergeron.
What were you hoping for? Sorry, I'm trying
You're
to
being-
put something on the website
Oh,
to indicate that.
Yes, I was just hoping that you could describe your 3 children you have experienced the school. You can come over here. That's called throwing
Come
under
to
the
the
bus.
mic.
That's under the that's under the bus.
You can only throw so many people into the bus now.
All 3 of my kids love their teachers. They love being present in school again. The kindergartner regularly on Zoom starts every comment with, Ms. Cullinane, I love you. And then, the Zoom stuff has been great. The asynchronous things actually for us, I think, it's all a question of the teachers finding a rhythm, the students finding a rhythm, the families finding a rhythm. A lot of the things that they've been able to do outside lately, like collecting leaves so they can then count the leaves, are really nice little experiential learning things that you get to blend what you're doing outside the classroom with what you're doing in. So it's been great, but we're all thankful to be back in person, I think. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for volunteering.
Must be in the Army.
I've just not personal, things are fine in our family and everybody seems to be adjusting. But in the comments I've been getting from other families in town, kind of picking up on a high degree of variability. So people who it's going really much better than expected, and others who seem to either their kids are having a harder time, just given the kind of disjointed nature and the transition to remote activity and being in, or for whatever reason is not that don't seem to have the same kind of spark or enthusiasm for school that they used to have. And then just to pick up on the theme you raised, Steve, there's a high level of anxiety, I think, in the community about the going to remote metric, and whether that's an appropriate metric given where there could be an isolated pocket of positive cases that actually wouldn't present a public health risk. So I think that's something that we really need to keep an eye on. I think the child that you mentioned hitting refresh was joined by probably hundreds of other people in the district.
And adults, yes.
And some consternation that it didn't get posted exactly at 6 p.m. last night. So I think I have some concerns about that metric and where we ended. I know why we ended up where we did, but I just think it's worth keeping an eye on.
So at a previous school committee meeting, I asked for permission to look at this metric and try to come up with a statistic that would more accurately reflect what the purpose of this is, which namely is to get a sense of how much is COVID spreading through your community. And so I have sent a letter to the Commissioner of actually I sent it to Rob, who passed it on to the Commissioner of Education. And I have been teaching a class on mathematics of pandemics this semester, and I've been working on this with my students. And of course, I can give you a very long, complicated formula, but I could also give you a really simple one that I think will address the issues we have. Right now, you do not reward any community for the amount of testing that they do. And one of the reasons that you should do this is, if you test 100% of the town and there are 5 cases, that's very different than if you test only, say, 200 people and you're testing mostly the symptomatic people. So one of the things is, the more testing you do, the more confidence you have about what's going on, and the less impactful small numbers are. So in the previous cycle, before this week, we had 5 people in a 2-week period, and before that was 6. If instead we had had 4 people, then we would have been gray, and there would have been no concern at all. And so I agree completely, and this is actually one of the items that the Education Subcommittee is going to take up on our next meeting, which is Tuesday, October 13th, 3:30 p.m. by Zoom, is we're going to look at what the metric is hoping to capture, what it actually does capture, and what could be a solution that really does a better job of what we're trying to get at. And I think we have some good proposals that we will be sharing with the state, and looking forward to what they say.
Yeah. That's great.
Did you want to add something, or you?
Can I just flag real quick just on, I think that there might be overlap between the Educational Subcommittee meeting and the DEI meeting. I don't know how long we're thinking that one will run, but we just might have people wanting to switch.
Right.
Okay. So next up on our agenda are the subcommittee liaison reports, and first up is policy, which is Carrie.
Okay, this is actually a suggestion from Rob that we amend the time by which the committee receives the supporting materials for meetings. It had been 3 business days, and I think that's because we used to have school committee meetings on Tuesdays, And so the idea was to get the packet out on a Friday in order to prepare for a Tuesday meeting. And now that committee meetings are on Thursdays, it sounds like it's better for the administration to do what is typical and state standard, which is 48 hours. So do you want me to read the whole policy, or do you want to just vote on the amendment?
I think we can just vote on the amendment. It's such a minor change to the.
So I'll just read that paragraph.
Yeah.
So the agenda, together with supporting materials, will be distributed to the school committee members no less than 48 hours prior to the meeting to permit adequate time to prepare for the meeting. And I'd also say that we didn't used to have Google Docs and Google folders, so the fact that we can continue to upload things and just let the committee members know, hey, there's another document in your folder, and is great. And the last thing I'd say is I noticed that the packet did become available on the website at the beginning of our meeting. Well, I didn't really check at the beginning, but the packet is now available on the website, where packet materials are always available at the beginning. What was that?
I don't know.
And so I think that's going to be helpful for people in the community who want to make public comment or who just want to know what it is we're talking about.
Yeah, it's similar to the way it was when we
would be meet
physically
in a room
had
and have
the public,
packets. Yeah. So anyway, I'll move the revision to agenda format policy BEDB for approval.
I'll second, and I have a comment.
Okay, Green moves, Miller seconds. Discussion?
And so just because it says, no less than 48 hours doesn't mean we can't try to aim for more than that, especially if it's going to be a long, complicated packet that we need a lot of time to read. And so if there's something that's very long, it's nice to have some extra time on that, especially if we know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question on that. It's great that the packets are being, the links are on the public-facing website. And I just wonder if the timing of that, if there's a reason it can't happen in advance of the meetings, so that, people who want to have a public comment can have seen the materials in the packet that they can be commenting on. I don't know the kind of dynamics on that. It's something that's come up last year, and then Stephen Dravis raised it recently. And other boards do it, and it can be helpful for people who are looking to review the materials in advance of a meeting.
Well, in addition to distributing it to the school committee, we could say that a redacted version will be posted.
Rob, do you want to speak to this? Because
we were trying to work through this whole thought process because the way things had always happened before, prior to the advent of online meetings and essentially materials being the possibility of distributing materials well in advance. The idea was that school committees would get a packet, and then anybody who attended the meeting would pick the packet up at the meeting. And part of this is a description of that the school committee is the body which needs information in order to conduct its deliberations. And typically what would happen is that's why the school committee would get it in advance of a group. I would argue that if everybody has it, given the modern world we live in, discussions could start long before the school committee ever has an opportunity to discuss the material. And what happens is that, social media becomes a forum where things are discussed long before the school committee has an opportunity to opine. Actually, no, to discuss and deliberate and make a decision. So one of the difficulties of publishing the materials that the school committee is going to discuss well in advance is that those things can then become a part of the public discourse on social media, which I don't think would be helpful to to calm reasoned deliberations by a school, by this deliberative body. So the way we were basically trying to split this problem, how to deal with this, is to be as descriptive as possible in our the agenda items, so as to give a clear understanding of what it is that's going to be discussed. And that's because otherwise I think we just run a difficult, we run a danger of undermining the deliberative capacity of this body, who has the responsibility of discussing these things and the responsibility for making decisions. Now, that's my way of thinking. I might be wrong, but the modern world, actually I shouldn't say modern world, the digital world gives, basically creates a forum that runs way ahead of the work that has got to be done by deliberative bodies. And I think that's the difficulty we were trying, the needle we were trying to thread in trying to figure out how best to do this. And as I said in the past, if we were not in a digital age, which I know is a silly thing to say because that's reality as we are, that everybody would have had the materials at the meeting. They would never have gotten them beforehand. And I seem to think that the idea was that the school committee should have them before everybody else has them. Because, I don't know why, that was the way it was done. But I think that, I think the way we can address this is by being as descriptive as possible in the development of the agenda, so that anybody who wants to speak about, or basically wants to comment, will have a clear description of what's going to be discussed. That was my thinking in recommending this to Carrie, and I guess basically a way of trying to figure out how best to do this. And also, one other aspect is that as it was just mentioned, materials are often added. Documents are added right up until the start of the meeting.
Yeah. No,
And so that becomes, that's, and I know I'm not saying that's good. I actually, as a part of our discussion, we were saying is that we should have an end date of when any materials are going to be added to the school committee packets. And because that's, I just think that's the best way to do this, is that only go with what we, go with what you got 48 hours before, give it out to
But I
everybody.
mean, there will be issues like this where something does come in at the last minute and it does need to be added.
Yeah.
I think it's advantageous to try to give more information to the public so that they can provide useful comments to us before we have our discussions. And if you want to have that, not the whole 48 hours, to have 12 hours or 6 hours, so that there's still some time for the public to read things and send in public comments or decide if they want to come. And that would still give the school committee time, and then that would lessen the immediate impact. That might be a nice way to balance and just see how that goes for a few meetings.
And as I said, this was my thinking on it.
Right.
I am not sure that my thinking is necessarily sound. The idea that that the school committee, that if we release this information, it becomes a social media conversation. That's just the way I'm thinking about it, and I don't know if that's the best way of thinking about it, but that was the reason, at least the rationale behind my suggestions.
Yeah. I think, I agree with that, and I think the way that, we've always handled the materials is that they're not public documents until the meeting begins, right? Just because they're emailed to members, it doesn't mean that they've become public documents. And sometimes there's an issue when members forward packets to other people who aren't on the committee, and then that becomes you're sharing information that hasn't yet been discussed in the proper venue. So this is intended to be the venue for conversation, and it's not really a conversation between us and our constituents. It's a conversation within the public body. This is why we're elected. It's one of the jobs we're elected to do, is to deliberate on the materials of the meeting. If we want to change how we go about doing our business, then that should be a discussion about our protocols and our procedures, I think, because there definitely is a consideration for accessibility, and I think that's the other side of it. It's like the digital age means we want everything accessible, and we want it available now, and we want it, if you have it available, I should have it available, and that's just not how this public body has ever operated, and I think there are good reasons for that. But it is potentially a conversation we can have when we next review our protocols and our procedures.
I think that would be a conversation worth having, and again, when we were trying to decide what it would look like when people came back to school, our big fear was, will people be able to wear the masks? Will they keep it on? And it turns out our fears weren't as bad. There was a lot of fear. What is it going to be like when the Williams students come back? I think it's worth experimenting a little bit and see what happens. I think it would be interesting if the Mount Greylock Regional School District meeting packet becomes, trending on Twitter and some of the stuff like this. I'm not too worried about that. I think this provides an opportunity for members of the community to make better public comments, maybe provide some information that might be useful. It doesn't have to be the full 48 hours, but if you did, 6 hours so that there is still time for people to look at before a meeting, that might be an experiment worth trying.
If I just might comment, I think that the process, the policy does not have anything, does not speak to that.
Right.
It is a procedure. So I think that we could, alter the procedure. I was just describing the procedure that we were trying to do, and I think this, alter the procedure depending upon what the school committee wants to do.
And I wasn't suggesting that this idea needs to be embodied in this policy.
Yeah.
I think there's enough flexibility for however, the administration and the board chair or the committee wants to, do things. It's just me personally, I tend to, on the kind of competing values thing, I think I tend to just fall a little bit to the side of kind of engaging in more kind of transparency, and with the hope that it might encourage more informed engagement when we get to public comment period. So that's just all. It's not something that I think is a huge issue. It's just something to think about.
And one thing that we could think about along those lines is moving public comment to later in the meeting.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right? So other public bodies have public comment after the agenda items have already been discussed, so that people know what has been discussed. That's another option that we would have.
How does that work in the sort of hybrid? Well, we can talk about it later, but I'm just curious how, if we were physically here, there would be a sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
But without that, it's, we have this digital sign-in sheet. And
I don't know that other public bodies are meeting in person right now, so I've only seen it happen on Zoom. It's much easier. So you can open up a, raise hands, Q&A, all that kind of thing afterward. It's a lot easier when we're all on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to support this, and I think, like everyone thinks, the more information everyone has, the better off we are. I enjoy working with this committee. I take a survey, I find that my fellow committee members come to meetings prepared. I find almost invariably they all read what has to be read, and they're not coming to meetings and not knowing that. And I think it was Alexander Haig, Secretary of State, said, if you knew what I knew, you would agree with me. So the more people know what we know, the more they would agree with us.
Okay, so we have some action items out of that. Any other further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That motion passes. Okay, next up is finance. Do we have a finance update, Jamie?
No, other than we've met today to review warrants and also discuss agenda item 8A. So we'll have, some thoughts on that when we get to that, but nothing until then.
Okay, thank you. And education, Steve?
So we've talked a lot about, I think, the items, just so that it's in this part of the meeting as well. The next education subcommittee will be Tuesday, October 13th, 3:30 p.m. by Zoom. We will be talking about in-person, remote, hybrid learning. We will be talking about state metrics. And then I had one other item, which I'm not sure if it quite falls in the subcommittee liaison reports, so I will ask your permission, and if it's not appropriate, just let me know.
Okay.
In previous meetings, we've had representatives from the student council come and speak to us, and I was just wondering if we were going to be doing that again, and also it might be worth expanding this and having representatives from the 2 elementary schools.
Yes, we definitely will start having student council reports. That is a very good point.
I was trying to think where to put that in the agenda tonight for comment.
I know. I will add that to my action item because
I think they haven't had their elections yet.
that's probably true. But we probably could have included the, I don't know how that dropped off.
Right.
I'll take the blame
Excellent.
on that one.
Well, no, I mean, there's so much stuff going on, but
I know.
I just find, speaking of, hearing voices, hearing the student voices has been extremely
absolutely.
valuable over the years. And as we go through all of this stuff, they're the ones who are living it with the teachers.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Okay, next up is the business administrator update. And so we'll turn over to Joe Bergeron.
Good evening. Your friendly business administrators here. All right. Multi-purpose building project update and the final change order. So good news is we've got our C of O, sheet of paper in hand. Tierney and all of their subs did an amazing job throughout COVID of not just keeping their own stuff in line, but managing all the shocks to the supply chain and everything else. So really, I can't thank them enough for being the calm in the middle of a literal storm. They did a wonderful job. We do have a final change order here, change order number 4, which is in front of you on a sheet of paper, and it got emailed out as soon as I had it today. What we're looking at here, if we take the list of 4 items, concrete curb, upgrade from asphalt. This is something where, as the team was looking at the way the curbs were shaping up just being asphalt, they realized that the durability of those should really be called into question. And so the change here is to use a concrete curb. Gable and plywood, this is in the storage area. The insulation was being left bare, which caused some concern with it. It was okay by code, but it was causing some concern that led people to say that they really should cover that up with plywood. So if you go into the storage area, when you look up to the left and right, you would see plywood covering as opposed to raw insulation. Exterior door hold opens. That was the gang bathrooms on the back side facing the fields. With those, the people pretty quickly realized during construction that as you open a door, there is no great way to keep that open, and those exterior doors leading into the interior doors where the bathrooms are really should be open and remain open during an event, during a time of use. And then surge protection devices, that's something where the line that runs between the admin building and the main building, given the way it was designed initially, if there was a ground lightning strike like the one that we had that hurt our water supply for a couple weeks, that kind of thing could have taken out the security systems in potentially both buildings. So this is an upgrade that really seemed absolutely necessary. All of this stuff is not required by code, but they are things that everybody is in agreement are significant upgrades to the durability or viability of the building. So this is a change order number 4. Total cost $12,632.48. I have it before you for review and approval. What it would do is it would take the total contract sum so that it's 2.5%. The cumulative is impact of the 4 change orders over the life of the project, 2.5% on the total building cost.
I'll move the change order number 4 for approval.
Second.
Okay, Green moves. Art seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes.
All right. Anything else on this building? No. All right. So review and approval. Yep. Was there? I'm just hearing things. Great. Review and approval of capital gift related Perkins Eastman invoices. In your packet, you had 5 invoices. One of them I just received recently. It's a standard course of the admin building invoice, and we have it in front of you more as a formality. The others are invoices that are outstanding from prior to when I was here, and they are invoices that are both per Perkins Eastman's contract, related to both the admin building, and some of this work is related to the athletic fields initiative. So because they are, they predate me, in discussion with the finance subcommittee, we agreed that it's best to get these in front of you so that if any of you have any background knowledge, any reason that we should be questioning these, you can voice that. Otherwise, what I would suggest is I can put the total sum in front of you and the invoice numbers, and we can move a motion to make sure these get paid as I believe we owe them.
I think the finance subcommittee already made a recommendation that we approve these, so they're essentially on the table already. You
That's
just need a
right.
second.
Yeah.
So the finance committee has
We
made a
recommend,
motion.
yeah,
We recommend it.
we recommend the approval of these. This is all work that, the work had been previously approved by the committee at one time or another, and we're under contract, we owe this money, so.
So what I would ask is that someone move a motion that the committee approves payment out of the Williams College Capital Gift to Mount Greylock of invoices numbers 15, 20, 22, 23, and 26, totaling $75,963.80 to Perkins Eastman.
Do you want to repeat that number?
$75,963.80.
7596380.
Yes.
Okay. I will move that we approve and pay out of the Williams College Gift Fund invoices 15, 20, 22, 23, and 26 from Perkins Eastman totaling $75,963.80.
Okay, Art moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second, but could we also add a date range to that vote where the invoices are dating from when to when?
Yes, the first invoice is dated October 14th, 2019, and the final one is dated September 8th, 2020.
Okay, any further discussion?
I have discussion.
Yes.
I'm going to support this, obviously, because I recommended it. And I apologize to my 2 colleagues because they heard this afternoon. I'll repeat it for the colleagues and for people that haven't heard it. When you look at these invoices, this is an excellent example of what happens when we ask things. When people say, well, let's do another study, or let's have another committee, or let's set another thing up, that costs money. And as you see what happens, you see things like design, you see things like, that's paid, someone has to do that work, and that has to be paid for. The thing that's most disturbing to me sometimes is that when you hear that from the general public, it's bad enough, but when you hear it from town officials, especially town officials that have been in office for many years, make these offhanded things, or let's do another thing. They make it sound like it's a free object. It isn't free. It costs money to do things. And I think that this is the next example. $75,000 is a lot of money. I'm not disagreeing with anything that's there, other than to point out that when you make recommendations to have things done, you have to realize that that recommendation has a price to it. I'll say one last thing about this, and I've said it many times. It isn't so much the $75,000 that it costs, because what happens is that $75,000 is taken out of the capital gift meaning that over the next 10 years, that money is not growing. So that isn't a $75,000 price tag. Rather, what it is closer to a $150,000 price tag because of the value of money over the years. So I just want to point out the fact that everything has a price and nothing is free. And we have to be careful when we make recommendations about doing things because it costs money to do it.
So I just want to second Al's sentiments, and it is important to do due diligence to understand what the various options are so that we can make the right decision. But at some point, rather than spending money on more studies, let's spend money on doing things for the kids and for the district. The other thing which I think is worth remembering is we are paying for a lot of things from the Williams College Gift Fund that really should be paid for by the two towns.
Yes.
And we are using the gift fund to pay for the trailers. We've been using it to pay for the studies. We've been using it to pay for the administrative multipurpose building. And there was a reason why we didn't include this in the original Mount Greylock renovation project. But when we're trying to decide what to do with the money and trying to decide how much we want to keep in reserve, and when we're trying to decide what obligations we might be giving to the taxpayers in the future, the taxpayers have been relieved of a lot of obligations that they should have been paying for by using the gift to pay for these things. And I think it's just important to remind people that we have been able to keep taxes low. We have been able to have the building project come in at a little bit lower because we used the gift to pay for so many things.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Did you get a second?
Yes. So all in favor of the motion as amended?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. That motion passes.
All right, anything else on that one? Nope. Great. So FY21 update. 2 weeks ago on the expense side, you got a very detailed update as to where we were headed. That is the only shock to the budget so far for FY21. On the revenue side, as we had covered earlier in this fiscal year, Chapter 70 was coming in level funded. Chapter 71 and Circuit Breaker are still to be determined. The state has indicated some ways that they're trying to roll forward with it, but there are no promises yet. So those are two pretty significant sources of revenue for us that we don't have locked in numbers for yet for this fiscal year. I am looking forward to being able to take a deep breath now that school actually is opening and trying to get into a better rhythm with respect to reporting how things are going in this fiscal year. I also need to finish closing out the last fiscal year, which is something that I breathed a deep sigh of relief a week and a half ago when the state said that they were pushing all of these reports out by a couple weeks for everybody. So I didn't have as much of a fear as I did going in towards October 1st about the end of year report and certifying E&T. So big thanks to the state there for giving us all a break or a breath. Any specific questions though on FY21 right now?
So that we have 2 more weeks to close out the year and certify the E&D?
We have at least 2 more weeks, and I do think that I will be asking for an extension.
Okay.
Part of that is, I think that all of the hardship that other districts have experienced, I think we've got a little bit more even to fall back on as far as reasons that we might need a little bit more time to get that done. So I will be putting that in probably tomorrow or Monday to try to give myself a little bit more time.
My other question has to do with enrollment. Is that still an October 1st enrollment that we send to the state?
I'm actually not sure. That would be a Rob Winook question, and I'm not sure whether or not those deadlines were pushed up, the October 1 enrollment figures. I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions.
All right.
Next up on our agenda is Phase 2 Fields Project discussion and next steps. Carrie, do you want to speak to this item?
I can start. So this was put on the agenda originally with a potential vote or a possible vote, which was a surprise to me. It's no longer on the agenda with a vote because I asked if we could maybe have a special meeting to discuss this. But it got me thinking, it sounds like there might be members of the committee that want to take a vote on this. And I thought we should talk about it as a committee. Is this something that we think we should do? And I've been trying to see sort of both sides of it. So I thought maybe we could kind of do the pros and cons thing. And I also am wondering what a vote might look like. Like, what would we be voting on if we were to vote? So I can think of, the last document that we have, which actually Joe had never seen and I had never seen, and I don't know that the committee had ever seen it. I did forward it to Jamie to see if Jamie had ever seen it, was a value engineering that Traverse Landscape Architects had done on September 26, 2020. But I don't think it ever came to the committee. So the last vote that was taken was on the on the project, which included the synthetic turf. It went out to bid. The bids came in too high, and then there was discussion of having some value engineering done, which is what this addendum was essentially, or what the VE report was. And there was discussion of doing some other things like having a community forum or gathering more information. So I've been thinking, some reasons to take a vote, either whether it's tonight or next week, or this month. I can think of 3 reasons. One would be so that current school committee members can document their support or non-support for the Phase 2 proposal with the value engineering prior to the turnover of the committee in November. A second reason would be to stay on track with the April 2022 deadline on ADA and Title IX compliance. We can apply for a second waiver, as we approach our own, the deadline that we have. And Joe has checked in with it. I forget who you checked in with, but there seems to be some indication that given COVID, waivers are not as much of an issue as they might be.
I had asked Dan Colley of Perkins Eastman what the process would be, and he said that it's likely, given the pandemic, that would be issued, but there are no promises, and we can't call them. Well, we can't call them right now and say, hey, can we get a waiver? It would need to be closer to the deadline, which
just a
So a
point that I-
waiver extension, I've got a lot to get through, Alf. Do you
Okay.
mind if I,
Okay.
is that okay? Okay. So a waiver is possible, perhaps likely, not guaranteed, and we already have a waiver. So the waiver that we're operating on right now is April 2022, which means if we were to meet that deadline, we would really want to send things out to bid in December or January and get the work done. So that's number two. Number three, to provide an additional and potentially year-round field for use by the Mount Greylock teams, the PE classes, and community organizations during COVID, when there are perhaps more reasons to be spending time outdoors in open spaces. So those are the reasons that I came up with based on conversations that I've had with people who've been working on this for much longer than I have been looking into it. There are probably other reasons as well. I also considered a number of reasons to postpone a vote or to not support a vote for the Phase 2 proposal, which includes the synthetic turf field. The main reason being that there are a number of members of the community that feel that the Phase 2 subcommittee and the school committee have not adequately addressed the concerns that have been raised. The first level of concern is regarding process. We heard from Stephanie around some issues with process earlier this evening. We did make, or the previous chair made a commitment to gather more information, but then that chair resigned. We did talk, or prior to my coming on, there was talk of holding a public forum, but then we had COVID, right? I actually suggested, and the finance committee approved, forming an advisory committee, but then the superintendent left and the business administrator left, and we had reopening to deal with. So there are very good reasons why we've not been making progress on doing some of the things we've talked about doing. But here we are. It's, we're coming up on this deadline where we really should be getting things done. Another issue is that the documentation and the process for Phase 2 is a little bit problematic. So there has been a call for a current needs assessment for athletics and PE. We've done some looking, and the most I've been able to find is some indication that we should do but have not yet done a formal evaluation of a needs assessment. There certainly has been discussion of what our needs are, but if you were to point to a document, this is the needs assessment for Mount Greylock sports teams and PE. There is no such document. And that's problematic for people who need for us to justify why we think we want to spend upwards of $2.5 million on a project that includes synthetic turf. We need to be able to justify that need. There are certain milestones in the decision-making process for which there is no formal documentation. My guess is if we had hired an OPM and had somebody professional sort of moving us through this process, we'd be able to go back and point to all these things. But as a result, we can't, and it leaves people wondering, well, why was that decision made? Where's the documentation? I want to see how we got to make this choice as opposed to that choice. So we're left with this question: was the subcommittee process exhaustive, inclusive? Was it broad enough in its representation? These are the questions that are coming up, and it's important for us to decide how important it is for us to be able to answer those in a way that is satisfactory to people. So does the school committee have an obligation to adequately vet this project publicly prior to voting? I would say a lot of people would say, well, absolutely yes. And a lot of people would say, we've done the work, right? Al would say, we've done the work.
Yes.
We've talked enough, and let's get this done. So that brings me to the question of a decision-making rationale. Al has talked quite eloquently recently in the Finance Subcommittee meetings about how our focus should be on playability, that this is not an issue of cost. We should not be holding ourselves back because we need to figure out, how we're going to pay to replace a turf field. The issue is playability. And if we all agree that the issue is playability, then a turf field is a no-brainer. If we all agree that the issue is playability, because there is no better solution to the problem of playability than a synthetic turf field. But should the issue of playability outweigh concerns around long-term cost, around the environmental implications, around the health and safety of synthetic turf versus natural grass? And again, this is something that perhaps is not as well documented as how the focus became about playability, as opposed to these other concerns. So, this does not provide me with any kind of solution here. It leaves me with the question of what should our next steps be, right? Should we track down the existing documents, more existing documents that have not been previously shared with the committee or the community? Because my sense is that there's sort of a period of correspondence where some documentation came in, but then everything kind of stopped. And I think this was like last September, about a year ago, right? Where there's like the value engineering, right? It's just kind of sitting there in someone's email, and it never went any further. There's some documentation that we need to look at if we're going to make a decision based on numbers, but those numbers are a year old already. So there may be more documents to track down. We need to we could be organizing the documentation in a manner that is comprehensive and cohesive, so that we can point to it and say, here's when this decision was made, and here's the conversation that went on around finding this solution as opposed to that solution. We can determine what new information is needed, if any. And I know that this argument has been called a delaying tactic. I've heard this several times from several people. Anybody who calls for new information is just wanting to delay the project. And I don't think that's true. I think that there are people who really want us to look at different ways to get numbers around grass fields, for instance. And I think that's fine, but I think the issue on the table is, do we want to pursue this phase 2 proposal? And if so, do we want to do it now as opposed to waiting and making sure that we have all the information that we need? We need to determine whether or not to hold this public forum that we said we would hold in March. Is that to the benefit? And I know that people who have worked on phase 2 don't feel the need for another public forum, right? We've heard all of the comments, we've heard all of the feedback, we've heard, but we've said multiple times that we want to hear from the community. We want to hear what the concerns are. We want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that everything has been well vetted. So that's kind of where I leave it. I would like to know from the members of the committee who want us to take this vote, whether any of these other things kind of sway or outweigh the need to take the vote now, meaning October, as opposed to waiting until we have, a new superintendent. Not waiting until, but that would be the result. We would be, if we don't take the vote in October, we will have a new superintendent. We will have at least 4 new school committee members, potentially 5, right? And someone's going to have to take this up. I mean, so that's how I see where we are, and that's just my voice, so I'm going to stop there.
No, thank you. I mean, my feeling right now, speaking as an individual on the committee, is that we need an organized and concise document that
What do we need?
an organized and concise document that we can point to, whether that is a series of documents that, as you described, says, this is the documentation, this is why we made these decisions, this is why we went forward, here's all the information. What's missing? And I almost think we did promise a forum to the public. We did promise that. We haven't done that. There, as you pointed out, there are various reasons why that hasn't happened. And I do think that's unfortunate. We were also supposed to be compiling this documentation so that we could, as an entire committee, make a decision that was informed and have this document and say, this is why we made this decision. I'm sitting here right now saying, I haven't seen that document, it hasn't been created. I would be uncomfortable making a decision right now. I would like to personally get, I know you feel like you can vote, I know you feel you can vote, and other people feel that way, but what I would like is to see that documentation so I can feel that we're making a responsible choice, because it's a big choice and it involves a lot of pieces, and I just want all of those pieces to be in order so that I can state what my opinion is and feel that I've made an informed decision.
Just to clarify that, so is there something specific you feel is missing that you want, or you just want something that packages what we've talked about?
I think there are pieces missing, and I think there should be something that packages all of the things that we're talking about, because it is a giant financial commitment down the line. I mean, we're taking money from one thing that we can afford a certain amount right now, but then it's going to have a financial implication further on down the line, and I just want to see how that's played that out, how we got to. I still don't, I've been sitting here for 2 years, I still don't know how we got to the pure focus of artificial turf versus exploring some of the other options. And maybe they were explored,
Yes.
we just haven't seen that documentation. So it's just those pieces, and I think if we had that kind of documentation for the public, for the constituents who are, wanting to provide their feedback on what's going on, if we had that documentation, it would make everyone feel better that they were a part of the decision, because we have explored everything.
Don't we have this though? I feel like we have it. It's just in
I know what you're talking
minutes
about.
and bits and places over the past however
Yep.
many years.
If we have it, send it to me.
Well, again, if it's in bits and pieces, it's not in a comprehensive document that we can point to and say, here's the trajectory, here is the conversation, here is the journey of how we went from point A to point B.
And I
We
think it'd
need
be-
to be
Go
able
ahead.
to, point to any project manager would have created a binder of all of the documentation, all the minutes, all the decisions, all the votes, and that just doesn't seem to have been done. We have a PowerPoint that was presented in, 2017 and another one in 2019.
I think that would be really good for us to have, but I would also argue that at least I don't feel like I need that before I vote, because I think that we all have that information, and it'd be really good to be able to provide kind of a very short summary, the pros and cons and how we ended up where we did, and the timeline. But I don't think I need that to vote, and I think that the reasons you laid out for reasons to vote, I think, are very compelling, and I'm not as compelled as the reasons for postponing. I think one thing that we don't really talk about also is that we currently have fields that are, or the field is not only not really playable, but it's not in compliance. Like, it's not sufficiently accessible. It's not in compliance with Title IX. It's kind of unfair to the students, I think.
That's a point that Jamie made in the finance committee meeting when we last talked about this, was that
Yeah.
your level of comfort.
I'm not
is-
comfortable with, I don't think it sends the right message, and I'm personally uncomfortable with saying we can push off the accessibility upgrades, code requirements, and the Title IX compliance requirements. That's not to say that there's probably not a way to get into compliance with those regulations that's a much smaller project with a much smaller budget, right? I mean, the accessibility ones really is accessible surfaces, maybe some accessible parking or drop-off areas, and bleacher improvements or bleacher removal, right? Like that's that. And the Title IX is comparable facilities for boys sports and girls sports. So we're really comparing softball and baseball. And the baseball field is not such an elaborate infrastructure that it seems to be a much smaller project to do that. So I think it's really important for us to try, personally, to get into compliance by that deadline. It seems eminently feasible. It's still a year and a half out, and it's not a huge project.
It sounds like you would advocate doing that.
I would definitely say that that's something that we should try to hit that target. My personal question right now, I have a few of them, but the most immediate one is to pick up on, what does the vote look like? Like, if, and do we even have a project that would be ready to go out to bid, right? And what does that look like? And I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen the plans for that, at least not in the last 9 months or so. So I don't know when there was a problem. The Phase 2 committee went back and did some value engineering, whether those resulted in plans or not.
No, I think that document was the last one.
So we don't really, it's not like we're even at a point at the moment that I see it that there's something a project to approve. Seems like we could indicate which direction people feel comfortable or more comfortable heading, but I don't think we have even, as I understand it, something that we can approve. We can't prove something unless we have a quote attached to it. That's where I'm. Some other questions that I think a forum or a meeting, a subsequent meeting would be helpful to address. I still don't feel like we have an answer on life cycle costs. I mean, I think there's some data in the spreadsheet that you pulled together, Carrie, that was really helpful. I think in much better numbers or estimates, ballpark figures, than had been presented back in the fall of the early summer of 2019. There were some, I think, really poor numbers that were thrown up on a PowerPoint. Poor being nothing was adding up to me, but I think the more recent data that you had pulled together with more recent estimates seemed much more realistic to me.
So what I
are we
tried
done?
to, oh, sorry.
First of all,
So hard to see.
let's talk first of all about a waiver. Just in case everyone knows, we've already asked for a waiver. So we're asking for a waiver on top of a waiver, okay? Now, if you're not disabled, and if you're not a female, doesn't matter. we can just ask for another waiver, because it doesn't impact you. But the bottom line is that we should have ADA and we should have Title IX done by now. We just keep kicking the can down the road. And like I say, if you're not disabled, it doesn't matter to you. If you're not a female, it doesn't matter. We just ask for another. And Joe's right. They'll grant us another waiver. So we're now going to what, 2023? Is that when, if we ask for another waiver, that's when we have to have it done?
Alan, I don't think anybody at the table here
I know,
has
I'm just saying that
suggested-
when people say that, when people say, well, you know, I'm not saying anyone here, when people make statements like that, let's ask for a waiver, they have to understand what that means. That means that a certain population is not going to be serviced. That's what that means. It doesn't mean otherwise. It means that that's what it means. The other thing about this forum thing, I don't remember in March anyone making a motion and that it was voted that we were going to have a second forum. I may be wrong. I think I go to pretty much all the meetings.
No, it was
It was in January, when Dan was chair, he talked about having a forum.
Yes, thank you. Individual people on their own, certain, including the former superintendent and former chairs of this committee, acted separate from the committee. And they did things and they said, the committee did this. Well, we didn't do that. A matter of fact, the first forum was decided by that sitting chair and then that acting superintendent. That was never voted on by the committee. It was done on then. Okay, just so you get the history of what's going on. Right? Why I sometimes feel it's kicked down the road. We want to know more information. We went through a whole big thing about, remember we put written questions towards our consultant. Remember that?
Yep.
The consultant replied in written questions. We had a big deal about that. And what did the chair of the committee do? Nothing. We never discussed those questions. That was going to be the turning point of decision making, that we were going to ask these questions in writing, we were going to get answers in writing, and then we were going to decide. We did all that. The chair did not take it, died. Then the committee said, well, what are we doing now? I'll tell you what we need. We need a good assessment. Thank God, I don't even know who John Dupree is. I know he's a professional engineer. I know he's part of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. A professional engineer does a cost analysis presented to this committee. The chair of the committee guided it. It never went further. We never discussed it. We never did anything more on it. So the idea that we're not doing these things is just incorrect. And people still talking about, then we made the Phase 2 committee, when I was on it, it's since changed. Then the Phase 2 committee said, listen, we're not going to put the chrome rubber in. You know what we're going to do? We're going to put Brockville in. It doesn't have any toxicity to it. It was great. We thought that was a great compromise. People are still talking like we're talking about putting in AstroTurf. We're talking about putting in Brockville. That has nothing to do with it. And it goes on and goes on and goes on and goes on. Then we changed the subcommittee. We had another Phase 2 subcommittee. That Phase 2 subcommittee never even met. Yep. The chair of the committee never called a meeting of the second Phase 2 subcommittee. Then we decided, well, Bina, we're not doing that. Why do we? And I'm just telling you what the history of the whole thing is, and why I sometimes feel that we keep kicking the can down the road. Then we had an advisory committee formed, in which you were chosen, Carrie, to head it up. So when I hear people say to me, we haven't done things, I say, yes, we have. Everything that was asked to do, we have done. I can go on forever. I don't want to go on forever, but this is not only a school project. This is a community resource. This is something that the whole community benefits from, not just the students at this building. And we saw with the Williamstown Soccer Club, over 100 students. They are our students. They're going to be here. So the idea that is controversial, that isn't true. And we have made gigantic. what does this sound like? You know, what does this negotiation sound like? We keep making concessions, and the other side keeps moving. Does that sound like something in the very present day that we have gone through? Well, that's exactly what the opponents of artificial turf is on. They keep moving the goalposts every time we make a concession. This to me is an absolute no-brainer. And if you want to talk about money, I'll be happy to talk about how we can spend it. If you want to talk about how we can, I'll be happy to do that. And that's not me. It's been on the boards for literally months. And the idea that we're hiding this. Well, I don't know what you want to do. I think we should start digging a hole tomorrow. That's my personal opinion. That's where I'm coming from. And I got oodles of documentation.
And Al, I wanted, Steve, do you mind if I just remind Al that I thought Al made a very good point about the long-term financing, again, in the Finance Committee meeting, which is if we know what the cost for replacement is, we either put the money aside ourselves, or we ask the towns to put the money aside, and we just say, hey, in 10 years, we're gonna need X amount of dollars to replace the thing, so let's make sure we do that. So, yeah, I think that's a valid argument.
So it may not be the intent to delay, but that is definitely the effect, and it's time for us to step up. I think unfortunately we have had a failure of leadership on this committee for months now, and I thank Stephanie Boyd for highlighting the issues and bringing this to our attention in terms of what we said we were going to do. I thought the objective when we talked in June was to be able to have a vote in October, that we would have everything assembled. We are doing far more for this than we did for the administrative multipurpose building. I think that's great. I think we're doing due diligence, but I think the due diligence has been done, and I'd like to make some concrete suggestions so that we can have a vote, so that we don't have to, did you say you have something?
No, I can wait.
Okay. So that we don't have to reset the clock again. This has been going on for 4 years. The gift from Williams College was not meant to relieve the taxpayers of the two towns from the expenses that they should be doing. It was meant to be a gift for the district, to do wonderful things, to provide wonderful opportunities. So far we've used it for administrative multipurpose building. We've used it for a trailer. We've used it for paying for studies. It's time to use it for something for the children. I'm not sure who is chair of phase 2 right now. I am happy to step up and be chair of phase 2 to reconvene it and to get documents ready for a meeting so that we can have a specific, detailed vote. I am happy to receive comments from members of the community and members of the committee as to what do you need so that you will be able to make a vote. The proposals have been changed from what they were originally, taking into account the feedback from people. What is going to happen, unfortunately, is that this is an issue where the town and the committee are not going to be 100% in favor, and this happens on issues. And we can try as much as we can to find common ground, but at the end of the day, there is going to be a difference of opinion as to what to be done, and it is our job as elected officials to take the vote. It is not the job of future committees. We have been looking at this for years. We are the ones who've been reading the material, who've been studying it, who've been listening. I remember Dan made a remark at a previous school committee meeting that this is the only time he can think of when a unanimous report of a subcommittee was not adopted. When we have had a people filled with listening to members of the community, when we had phase 2 committee meetings, members of the public were allowed to speak up at any time, and their input was taken into consideration. If we need to have another forum so that people can express concerns and express comments before we have a vote, I am fine to do that, but we owe it to our community to have the vote now in October. That is what we said we were going to be doing back in June when we postponed things. You know, the other thing to just really remark is, as has been mentioned, the best thing we can do right now for our children is to give them opportunities to be outside. When you look at how COVID affects indoors versus outdoors, when you look at the social emotional, one of the best things you can do, students were so excited, even when school was remote, that they were at least able to go to practice at Mount Greylock. It is, I think, almost criminal for us not to do our duty and have the vote while we are the committee. We have been looking at this for years. We've been following the stuff. We asked for additional documentation. If we need more, let's assemble the facts. Everybody put in what you need, and I am happy to work with people to make sure we have that information so that we can have a vote.
I have a quick comment.
Mhm.
I understand where you're coming from, Steve. I just want to push back on the idea that there's been a failure of leadership or that somehow we have been negligent in not advancing the Phase 2 project between June and October. I just went through, I've been keeping minutes at all our meetings, and I went through and I counted somewhere between 24 and 30 meetings that we've had in the months of June, July, August, and the beginning of September. And I mean, we have had an incredible workload going through leadership changes and figuring out how to reopen the school in that time period. So I understand your impatience and where you're coming from and the desire to get this done at a schedule that we set at a different time when we were having different circumstances. But I will also say that I think it's totally understandable, given the bigger picture, that where we are today with still some open questions. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think it makes sense to beat ourselves up over how we spent the last 6 months or 8 months or 9 months on this project. We have had much, much bigger priorities as a district, and I think we did the responsible thing in allocating our scarce time and resources between them and now. So the question really is how we go forward in a sensible way, but not going forward just to get shovels in the ground tomorrow, just because that feels like that's the schedule we agreed upon months ago when things were different.
Can I just make a quick comment? If it had started in June, I could understand that more, but this goes back to January and goes back before then in terms of just how long it's been. And if we've been having trouble getting things done, because I agree getting the school year starting is a higher priority, but if people were having trouble getting the information necessary, we could have said we need some help, or we could have reached out so that we could have the material assembled now. And I think that's where we had the failure, that when we see that as October is coming, we're not going to be prepared for this meeting to then say, well, what do we need to get that done? Because this has been discussed for quite a long time. It's been discussed before we went into the new normal. And that's why I'm saying I am happy to step up, and I'm happy to work with anyone, members of the community, members of the committee, and find out what information do we need so we can make a vote.
I'm trying to phone 7. I disagree that we should have another forum.
I couldn't hear you, Al.
I disagree that we should have another forum, because you're going to hear the same thing from the same 6 people who say the same thing over and over again. And I want to repeat myself, but they keep moving the goalposts on us. The people that are in favor of some kind of artificial field have made great concessions. Because I think it's best for the town. And I want to say something that when we talk about it being controversial, I don't know what that means. All I know is that our present athletic director, our previous athletic director, who we named the field after, both strongly recommend artificial turf. Our coaches, or the coaches that wrote to us, not one coach didn't recommend artificial coach. Our teaching staff, Brian Gill, when people say we wanted to, Brian Gill got up twice and made an outstanding discussion, talked about sections, talked about how many students there are, talked about how many classes there are, talked about, I don't know what else more you want for documentation. I mean, we're paying this individual who has great respect in the community, gets up and outlines line by line the number of classes, etc. And it goes on and goes on. I personally have talked to lacrosse coaches, officials, I've talked to soccer officials, and they have said the same thing. It seems anyone that's involved in athletics and involved with children in sports are in favor of some type of artificial thing. 3 years ago, maybe someone on this committee, we're here, we spent $55,000, I'll say it again, $55,000 renovating John Allen Field. That really isn't the number because it went into 2 fiscal years. The number to John Allen Field is probably $65,000 to $70,000 renovating John Allen Field. Okay, this committee, and I agree, I also voted another $30,000 to do this present field projects that we're doing now. So we're going to spend $100,000 and we can't play soccer. I don't know what else I want to tell you. The numbers are still so blaringly in favor of that. It's just $100,000 and we can't use the field.
So I think in terms of looking at how do we go forward with, and when do we go forward with the vote? I mean, the reality is that now it's October. As Jamie said, we need to figure out the most sensible way of moving forward. And to me, it really comes down to a question of, do we want the current committee to vote on this, vote on the way forward? Or do we want to take more time to engage the community more? And I don't think we can do both. I would argue that, I think we have, when I joined the committee 2 years ago, this was already in the works. And aside from the community engagement and information gathering, we have not moved very far forward. I think it's going to be very detrimental to this process to put this decision on a new committee where there may only be, worst case, 2 people moving over from the current committee to a new committee. There are other really important things for the committee to address moving forward that I would hate to take the time away from that. The community engagement that we have had over the past year in particular, year and a half, has been great and really appreciated, and I think really helped, just speaking for myself, helped me think through all of the different issues and what's important. To Al's point on concessions, I'd argue that they weren't concessions made, they were improvements. I think the shift from crumb rubber to Brockville is huge, and I think we've been able to mitigate a lot, if not all of the concerns. I'll say a lot of the concerns, at least to a great extent, that were raised, and it would be good for us to clearly lay that out in some sort of document. I don't know that we need that before we vote, necessarily in writing. But the shift to Brockville, the discussions on finance, the discussions on how we can set aside some funds so that when it's time to replace 10, 15 years down the road, we're in good shape. I think that the engagement we've had today has been really helpful, but when it comes down to it, I don't know that we're going to hear anything that we haven't heard or that we haven't considered. And we would then be in a position where we've helped the community feel better about the decision, but the decisions, the process is being, it's being tampered with in doing so, and I don't think it gets us to the best result. So I would strongly advocate that we send this forward as our current committee.
I would agree with that, and as Jamie was saying about all the pressing issues we have, it would be good to have this issue resolved, and I think we have the ability to resolve it while listening to all the voices and making an informed decision. And then it would be in our best interest to do that and not to have to almost reset the process again with a new committee and getting a new committee up to speed. This is our responsibility, and whatever information we need, let's get it.
So I have a question. What does the vote look like?
Well, one thing we can,
Not tonight. I'm just saying,
Right,
like,
but
what are we building towards to resolve this issue if we're going to try to resolve it before there's a turnover in the.
so the question is, do we talk about what that looks like, or do we talk about if we have a special session and we've set aside time and we've discovered when we can all meet, including the incoming superintendent, who I think would be valuable to listen in on the conversation, because whatever we do vote on, that's something that the new superintendent has to carry out. Do we talk about what information we absolutely need gathered, if we can have it done by the time we've set aside? Do we need to know what that vote looks like to have that discussion? I don't know.
Well, we've sent something out to bid in the past, so we've actually been able to do this before, and I would say let's use that as a starting point, and let's get something on the table for that meeting that I think is going to be October 16th at 12 to 2. I think that was the one time that worked for everybody.
So
I think what you want to do is go back to Traverse and say, give us the plan. I mean, again, it's going to cost money, but we're going to want the plans to put out to bid based on the value engineering that was done, assuming that no one else wants to look at the value engineering and see that it actually makes sense. I mean, that's another question. It's not been vetted by this committee or phase 2. It went in an email. Actually, it might have gone to the phase 2 committee. I don't know. I think it just went in an email.
Well, there was one meeting at least where they talked about, they're all beginning to blur and run together because there's been so many,
Right.
where we were talking about if we add this, if we remove that, what order do we want to do things on?
Yep.
Because they have to be taken in a certain order.
Right. So I would suggest, and I would love to hear if Joe has anything that he can add to this, because Joe is going to be a great partner in this, but he has limited time, right? And he potentially has access to some of these documents, but maybe not all of them. But he also has history with this, and he was here on the committee before, the public presentation was made, but you have some perspective to add to this as well, I think. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the conversation, but.
Now I'm serving the will of the committee. I'm trying to figure out what the will is. I think I've heard calls for organizing all of the information that already exists. So reaching out to everybody who's previously supplied information and getting it into some kind of palatable format. In terms of the plan that went out to bid last September and the subsequent value engineering options, did any of you in a committee setting review those value engineering options that Eddie provided and then prioritize or make recommendations on them?
Which value engineering are you talking about? That was done by who?
So Eddie,
Yes.
had in September after
Yes.
Yes.
the bids came back.
And we went through all the options, including, we talked about
Yep.
the track, we did all that.
And we talked about the order.
The order, we said, we're this and this and this and this. And even when we had the meeting, if you remember, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman that stood up, and when we came in like a 2.8, and the gentleman was who wanted to do the fields for us, and he says, I can get this down to 2004, 2.4. If Art and I sat down, we can get this down to 2.4. He said that standing where you're standing right now, Joe. He made that statement, and that was completely ignored by this committee, by our committee.
So just to make sure, those were things like eliminating the under drain system for the
Right.
softball
All that
field,
stuff we went through all that stuff.
eliminating the warning track.
Yes,
This sort-
you know,
okay.
I want to tell you something about auditing, and we're on the committee. We asked him dozens, and I mean dozens and dozens and dozens of questions, and he answered every one of them. And I want to tell you, the people that are on the committee, Joe, there was 8 people on the committee. If I was to do what they were, the talent that was on that committee, they were not only PhDs in education, in mathematics, but there were business people on that committee. There were people on finance committee. So it wasn't a fly-by-night committee. And we asked Eddie, and I can't think of dozens of questions. And we went over that report with him. And then later, when they said, well, how much does it cost? That's when John Dufris came in. When we thought it was all done,
Right.
John came in and gave us a value engineering, a professional engineer came in, and he listed how much the cost was per hour use. Think about that. How much it costs if you use the field. I mean, he did what a professional engineer does. For someone who has a brother and a father and an engineer, I know what that's like.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you,
Just-
Joe.
you know, 2 points that might help the discussion in terms of some things that have been said before. John's report was extremely valuable to me in terms of trying to come to a decision as to what is best. Because it's not just about cost, it's about playable hours.
Yes.
To give a sports analogy, if you could have the best player in the league versus a pretty good player, you would take the best player. Until you hear that you can only have the best player for 5 minutes, it doesn't matter if it's a better alternative. If you only have it for 5 minutes, it's not adding that much value. When you look at what's going on right now, when you look at how important playability is, playable hours, we heard earlier this year that if we had a turf field, we could have had more of a soccer season right now. The other big concern we had was what would happen to the Williams endowment. And we were quite concerned as to, would we still have the money for this after the administrative multipurpose? And fortunately, the stock market has not really fallen. And so I think we're in really good shape to be able to do this. I think we can collect the information we need. And I would like to suggest to the committee that that is what we do.
Yeah, I would be in favor of the committee saying, okay, the 16th, is that our number? Is that our day?
Yeah.
And that, not negative. We all go home, all take a deep breath, myself included, and come ready on the 16th, ready to vote. And vote, even if we don't do anything, at least we could say, okay, we're in favor of either A, B, or C. Okay? We don't have to dig a hole on the 17th. I'll agree to that. But we make it a vote, A, B, or C, whatever our option is, okay? And it's over. And if we want to start, the project, but if Eddie can come back and says, look, we can start the project in December, we'll start it in December. If he says that we'll start it in March, we'll start it in March. But at least it's finished. And then we can move on. We know what we're going to do. We're going to do whatever option we chose, be it artificial turf or organic fields or engineered grass. What was the other one, Joe? Engineered grass or something?
Yep, you could choose a field like
whatever the option is.
John Allen, you could have
We
an
vote on
engineered
it.
grass or an engineered turf.
Yeah, we make a decision and then we move forward. And that,
Well, it sounds like you're saying we shouldn't just vote yea or nay on the phase 2 recommendation, value engineered with Rockville, but we should look at the, we should choose just ADA, bringing it into compliance. That's option 1. Option 2 is a grass field. Option 3 is engineered grass field. Option 4 is artificial turf.
Yeah. What
You're
about-
saying we should
whatever, yeah,
choose,
but we come right in on the 16th, okay?
because then you're not voting on a specific project that you're sending out a bid. You're voting on a direction.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I think we should vote on
I'm trying
what
to
we
work
send.
with you. For the people I'm convinced what to do. I'm trying to give options to people who aren't convinced. I'm saying,
Wait.
okay, you have 6 days to think about this, okay? If you don't want to put in the Brockville, if you think that that's inappropriate, okay, then what's your option? And then we discuss that in front of the superintendent, in front of Joe, and we make a decision, we make a vote. I'm gonna vote for Brockville, I'm telling you right now, okay? But I'm willing to listen to whatever anyone has to say in relation to a reasonable explanation on why we should plant grass on the fields. I'm willing to listen to that.
So
Again,
I'm similar to that. I'm willing to listen to things again, to have everything all in one place, to put the packet up there and let the community see the packet before the meeting so that people can come prepared. But I think we should be a little bit more explicit that this is not just to indicate a direction. I think we should be deciding at this meeting, what are we going to do? Are we going forward with an artificial turf? Yay or nay? Or if not, are we going forward with natural grass? If not, and so on and so on. That we should have a definitive end. This has been going on for
I
4 or
agree
5
with that.
yees.
I agree with that, yeah.
on October 16th, we're gonna make
We're going to make a decision. And I am happy, so I don't know, do we have a chair of the Phase 2 subcommittee right now?
I think the Phase 2 subcommittee was the finance committee.
Yeah, so what
Was it-
happened on that was that Dan was the Phase 2 subcommittee. The last time there was a Phase 2 subcommittee. And then when he stepped down, it ended up going to the finance committee.
But I'm seeing.
I just want to so
Yeah.
that's where that ended up, just on the idea about like how the vote is framed or what we're actually deciding at the next meeting. We don't actually have a project until there are plans that go out to bid and we get bids back and we accept a bidder and a proposal. So just like in both of the Phase 1, the initial bids came in too high and then had to be rebid, and then in the Phase 2, the initial bids came in and there wasn't one that was acceptable to the entire committee. And so we can kind of indicate a direction to head in the next meeting, but that does not mean that there's a project that's been approved, right? This is all needs to go forward through the whole procurement process.
Right, but we could approve sending a proposal out to be bid.
We could,
And then if it comes in at the level we approve or less, then we go forward with it.
if we have plans for that, I don't think we've seen those. If they exist, I have not seen that.
So I guess that what we're hearing is that the value engineering list was approved by the Phase 2 committee. So what I would recommend is that we go back to Traverse and ask Art Eddy if he can provide for us plans that can go out to bid based on the value engineering list and the Brockville component, because those are the two things that were significantly altered from the original Phase 2 proposal.
Wait, I thought Brockville was in the Phase 2 proposal.
it wasn't a Phase 2 proposal.
No,
Not
not the
the one
original
out to
The
one.
bid.
original, I thought the one that went out to bid. had-
No, not the one that went out to bid.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
When the
No,
one out to bid came in
Okay.
higher.
The last, I think the last, and I may have, there were so many meetings on this and stuff, but I thought there was a meeting where there was a vote that says when we go back out to bid, we're gonna do bidding with the base project being code upgrades to the softball and baseball fields, and then have alternates for a grass field of some sort, have alternates for an artificial turf field of some sort, and have alternate for a track. I don't know if that vote is still alive, but that was the last,
Okay.
I think, vote that we took on what we should go out to bid with. Obviously, we're not in a position where we have all those plans developed to go out to bid. But I think the theory behind that motion was an attempt to demonstrate to the community that we had actually gotten some sort of cost comparison for the different ways that this project could unfold. Now, there may be other ways that we can give a cost comparison, not with the same level of accuracy as that going out to bid, but, you know, in the last, whenever it was in June or over in the spring at some point, Carrie, you pulled together the spreadsheet that had more kind of current data on what the kind of costs of the different options would be. I think it would be helpful before we take any vote on which direction to go to actually talk through those types of numbers in a school committee meeting, so the public can hear and understand what the financial implications of the different approaches are. And then we can revisit how the project unfolds with the bidding. But
I'm not sure what you're asking. On October 16th, okay, are we going to walk out of the meeting knowing what type of facility we're going to have at Mount Greylock, or are we going to say, well, let's wait another 3 months or another 3 years? What are we saying? I just want to know what you're saying here.
I'm saying that on October 16th, we're not going to have a project to approve, because we're not going to have a bid from a contractor to say, I will build you this field.
But that never happens. What always happens is that when any project comes up, I don't care what it is, we rely on our consultant who gives us, in their best judgment, what the project should cost, okay? And then it goes out to bid. This has happened in phase 1. And sometimes they come in higher, sometimes lower. And so if the object is that we're never going to wait to make a decision until we get in the bid, then we'll be sitting, I won't be sitting here, but there'll be a committee sitting here 6 months from now and be having an exact same conversation we're having right now. On the 16th, and I don't care what the number is, I don't care if it's $2.4 million or $2.8 million, okay? We have the money, we should go forward with it, we should make a decision. It's the best thing for the school and it's the best thing for the community, period. And that we're never going to convince a certain portion of any population that we should have anything but what they want. And there's nothing, that's one of the reasons why Dan resigned, because of his trying to negotiate with people that were not negotiable.
So
that's the end of that's it, Jamie. That's what it is.
But that argument goes both ways, right?
Well,
Like,
So-
are we listening to?
well, we did.
both sides? Let's be careful
Yes.
with that, like,
But you hear
that
what I
tone.
said.
Like, I
Right.
don't think it needs to have that tone.
Well,
in
you
this
can say what you want,
conversation.
but we had the phase 2 committee did make go in with good faith thing. I don't want to repeat ourselves again.
Yeah.
We
But
want.
can I
You
try
know
to say
what the
something, Al?
Brockfield decision was? That was a gigantic decision, and that eliminated injury. It eliminated.
So,
So
can I
to say
try to
that
say
it
something,
wasn't
Al?
negotiated in good faith is not a fair estimate of what the phase 2 committee did for almost 3.5 years.
Al? So I think at the meeting, we should bring this up and we should provide, documentation, provide timelines, provide evidence as to what has been done. And one of the points Kerry made earlier is a lot of it comes down to what is your priority. If playability is your priority, then as she said, it's a no-brainer. And so we need to have this discussion amongst ourselves. The way I'm viewing the meeting on the 16th is that we will have a conversation and that we will potentially approve sending out to bid a project. We won't be able to approve, a project because we won't have the numbers yet, but that the goal is that we will task a project to be bid. Is that a correct way to interpret the will of the committee? That that's the goal we're looking for the 16th, to reach a decision? if possible.
I think it's the will of half the committee.
Where would you put yourself, Carrie? That if we're able to reach a decision on getting something out to bid, is that a worthy goal for the 16th?
I think it's awfully ambitious.
I do feel if we had kept this at a higher burn level, that we would not be so pressed for time. And that's why I am willing to step up as much as necessary in the next week and work with members to get the information we need. So that if everybody from the committee says, what do you just let us know, what do you need to be able to make an informed decision? I think that should be our goal. And if we can provide those answers, then we should be able to send something out to bid. We've sent something out to bid in the past, so we have a template. We've done the value engineering. The information is there.
So that only works if what you want to send out to bid is what we had before with substitute with Brockville, because we don't have plans for the other parts of that.
Yep.
So that's a fine objective if what you're, in your mind, what you think is the best path forward is to go rebid a synthetic turf field. Ultimately, the decision is going to be made about whether you're going to do that project by a new school committee. That's not going to be the decision that's made by this collection of people, because the numbers won't come in until long after a new school committee is in place. So there's a first question about whether it makes sense for this committee to go through this process and then to have the new makeup be faced with a project that might not be their project, might not be what they want.
I'll say one last thing. I'll give you last week we were talking with Steve, and Steve was adamant about what we should do about in-person, and he presented his case, and we talked about it and talked about it. I even said to Steve, Steve, you don't have the votes. And he conceded with that, and we went on to our situation, okay? And that was what it is. And then he said, at the end of the meeting, he said, we disagree with the committee as a whole, so I'll support the committee. That was kind of my feeling, to tell you the truth, about the fields. I thought that all this stuff was a lot of white noise. And I was kind of conceded to the fact that, well, I'm not going to get the Brockville. I was on a committee. I got on a committee because we built a new high school and we got regionalization. Those are my two major goals. The fields is like cherry on Sunday. So I was kind of accepted that. That was the reality. It was obvious that the former superintendent was not in favor of the field. It was obvious that the former head of the school committee chair was not in favor of the field. And I just accepted that and said, well, my grandchildren live in California and North Carolina. They're not going to use the field. And I was ready to go on with my life on that. It was something that happens. And now it has come up again. Well, if it's come up again, then I want to discuss it again. But I was willing to accept whatever you wanted to do. If you want to have organic fields or grass fields, that's the committee's choice, fine. But we should decide. It should be our decision. We have worked on this long enough. Our decision. And whatever it is, whatever side you're on, you say, okay, and you move forward. That's what I think we should do on the 16th. And it will be over.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
We have a unanimous recommendation from a committee that had been looking at this for a long time, that had listened to public input, that had changed its proposal based on public input. And so I would like to move that on the 16th we have a meeting where the goal is, if possible, to come up with a proposal to bid.
I second that motion.
I don't think we have a vote on this. Can we vote?
I don't know if we can do this as a motion or...
I mean, it just needs to be a consensus to have a meeting, and what that meeting will be framed
about.
around. Do we have the necessary pieces?
Jamie, what was the last vote that you mentioned there were certain components that
Yeah.
the committee agreed to? Do you have that you can send to?
I mean, it would be in our minutes. That was from fall of 20.
But I mean, we did have a committee that approved voting for an artificial turf, and what prevented us from going forward was it came in a little bit more expensive than we thought. And so we then went back for value engineering. And
Well-
so,
So I see a December 9th meeting of the Phase 2 Capital Gift Committee where there wasn't any value engineering information in the packet, but it does seem as though that was a topic discussed. I don't see a vote by that committee, but can you recall if there was a meeting after December of last year? I'm just trying to figure
I know,
out
because
of-
what I can find.
December of 2019?
Yep. I don't see any more meetings of that.
well, because when did Dan become chair? Because then we had the reorganization, and then the
Right.
Phase 2 committee was changed, and Dan as chair
September
became,
19.
the chair of the school committee became chair of Phase 2.
Right.
And Phase 2 did not meet then.
In March of this year, there was a field discussion community info session for March 17th that was canceled probably due to the pandemic. I don't, after that, I see this email that Art Eddy had sent in March. To John Scavlem and the superintendent, indicating possible next steps. That was as of March of this year. It included a value engineering list, and it looked like John had discussed that list with Lindsay, the athletic director.
Yes. Yep.
That seems to me to be the latest bit of information that is kind of new stuff that might be inserted. I don't know. I think both you, Al, and you, Steve, indicated that you had seen that and that it had been, but I'm trying to figure out what I can point to as being
Right.
the most recent meeting.
And we went through all those options, and we looked at all those options. And then after March, and then we went through that whole series of changing the subcommittee, et cetera. You got it right. It's just what happened is that that's when I said, well, obviously artificial rock field isn't going to work. And that's came April. I said, well, it's all over, and let's go on with other things. And now we obviously can't again. But you're correct in that. And Eddie went over all that, and we talked about all that stuff. This isn't anything new stuff. It's just that it was just ignored by the powers to be, and it just,
So
Mr.
Alan's-
McConnell just put it off on the sidelines,
So Al and Steve, on the track that you're talking about, the next step
Right.
would be for the full school committee to see a recommendation for value engineered.
Yeah. That was,
For value engineered rebid.
that was put down the road, and that was put down the road, and that was the whole thing that came up. We were getting a committee going. John and I had talked about doing some private funding about the track, how we could get private funding on, and that was all. But then, of course, when that wasn't being supported by the former superintendent or by the chair of the committee at the time, it's like it just faded away. But yes, all those things were all in the mix. What to do, how to get the track, how to get private funding. This was all talked about. And we talked to Art about. We even talked to her to put. I don't. It's getting late, but yes, that was definitely discussed.
But this is why I think it's important that we're explicit about what we want to accomplish on the 16th, because I think that failure to be explicit has led us to have meeting after meeting after meeting, going back to January, if not back, earlier than that. We've put something out to bid before. There was consensus on sending something out to bid. It came back a little bit higher than we wanted to spend at the time, and so we looked to do value engineering. So I think we should be able to take that as a really good starting point. I mean, I think we should have been able to do this a while ago. I know we've had other things to do, It's going to be a busy week, and I am willing to do the work that is needed. So can we have consensus that this should be the goal for the 16th?
It wasn't the last will of the committee is the problem, right? So it makes sense to me, but I wasn't here when that vote was taken to come back with an alternate, to start with the base of the compliance and then to add the fields and then to add artificial turf. So I mean, it seems to me that can be done because that was all in the PowerPoint. All of those components were there.
Right.
It's just a way of structuring it.
Right.
Right? Not the engineered grass, but there was a field. I mean, I remember looking at it, it was like $50,000 to do the field.
Yeah, but if we're gonna go, right. if we're
So
gonna
maybe
go-
you want to
if-
add engineered grass or something.
Well, the idea as kind of, and now I'm quoting from this Berkshire's article, which is that the motion was that the Phase 2 subcommittee be charged with, that the revised RFP be constructed as follows: with a base to bring the fields into compliance with Title IX and the ADA, and then add alternates for a grass field, a turf field, and a track. So it would be,
Mm-hmm.
So
and I don't know if we're there. I don't know if that Phase 2 subcommittee did that, or if they focused on the, value. Joe maybe knows.
When was that meeting that you're looking at?
September
2009.
of 2019.
So I did find an October of 2019 Phase 2, October 1 meeting of the Phase 2 committee. And in looking at the minutes, they reviewed a set of value engineering options. And the architects were coming up with additional ways to create other types of value engineering. And there was conversation about what was voted on the night before and how to make that operational.
The night before.
No.
It looks as though the conversation is referencing a school committee meeting where there was some sort of vote made.
So that would have been, I think it's the September 26th committee meeting.
The September 26th special session.
So one of my fears as we keep discussing this is we're going to spend so much more money on studies that rather than having a track, we're going to have studies of having a track. That at some point, we have to act. And we got this gift years ago.
But that's not a good reason to take a vote.
Well,
I mean-
the reason to take the vote is that the information has been collected, and for the people who need more information, we've already been asked once in the past, what information do you need? Let's ask again, and then I am happy to take point of making sure that we get that information. I thought that's what we agreed to back in June when we said that we
Right,
would
but
be.
some of that information costs money to get, right? So if you want a quote from a different company on a grass field, for instance, you have to decide whether to pay for that. So,
And then for some of these things, then we may need to decide as to how much we want that information. Because as Al has been saying, we're spending the gift not on the students, but
Understood.
on studies.
But so that's part of the dilemma. There are a bunch of people who don't trust Traverse to make a good quote on grass because they specialize in turf, and you really want a company that specializes in grass to tell you what to do.
I thought Traverse said that they don't specialize in turf, but they do both.
Can I?
I'm not saying what Traverse says, I'm saying what other people say about Traverse. So this is part of the issue. And then my response to that has been, but that costs money. And they're like, well, of course it costs money, but we should be paying that money for a company that specializes in grass. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's the level at which some of these conversations are happening. So they're not going to be an easy solution.
I have to speak to that. You say sometimes, well, yes, that charge was made at an open meeting. The charge was actually made against Art Eddy by Ann O'Connor that he was pushing artificial turf because he gets a kickback, which is basically illegal. Dan challenged her on the spot, and she didn't back off and stayed there. Not only did they say, okay, that Art was getting a kickback, even there's no evidence at all that ever happened. He has done dozens and dozens of that. Then they doubled down and said not only was he getting a kickback, but the Phase 2 committee, I'm not a lawyer, what's the word when you know an illegal act is being committed and you don't say anything? What's that word? They accused the Phase 2 committee of knowing that he was getting the kickback and not saying anything. That was also disputed. Again, so obviously that still kind of exists out there in this white noise that Art Eddy and the Phase 2 committee has some kind of financial benefit from voting for artificial turf. That is absolutely, positively, unequivocally untrue. And we should say that and not perpetuate these rumors that certain people continue to use. Is that tone okay?
So if the Phase 2, did the Phase 2 committee look into how to structure the project for bidding like that? That's not something that ever made it back to the full school committee. I mean, the idea of value engineering and then swapping out the crumb rubber for Brockville came back out of discussion at some point, but I don't remember a conversation about, we can put out an RFP that is structured in that way, so we'll have cost comparisons of the different ways to approach things.
The two meetings that we would all need to read the minutes of in detail would be October 1st meeting of last year of the Phase 2 committee and the December 9th meeting of the Phase 2 committee. Those are the two meetings that came after that.
And are those on the website?
They are.
Okay.
If they're not, we can make sure they get, we need to make sure all of this stuff gets.
I think it is up there. I remember linking to it, then my links expired because I made tiny URLs, which expire apparently. But I'm pretty sure it's all up there.
Yeah. If it's Phase 2 committee meetings minutes, I would definitely have them, if anything is missing.
I have all the minutes here.
Right.
The source.
So I guess the question would be whether that can be done, in a week. Paying the invoices for Traverse will help us to get some work done, because those have been hanging over us for quite some time without our even knowing it. So, it doesn't hurt to ask, but we don't know if we'll have something that we can vote on in a week.
But we definitely could have more concise documentation in front of us in which to have further discussion that's more informed. Because it does look like, if nothing else, this is not a lesson to make sure that both subcommittees and regular committees are documenting and carrying that information through so that it's not getting lost from one iteration of a committee to the next, because in 2 years there have been 4 chairs. And that information.
And I was gonna say maybe 3 superintendents.
Breaks down, yeah, so if we can start compiling this information.
Right, and I'm not sure, Steve, I'll absolutely share the spreadsheet that I made. I think it's been given to the full committee. Just so you know that all the questions that have come up from
Right.
community members have been addressed.
Right,
Not necessarily to everybody's satisfaction,
correct.
but they have been addressed.
And some of them have led to changes.
Mhm.
In terms of next steps, I'm happy to help coordinate. I think it would be useful to talk to some of the people who've served on phase 2, and if they have time, they might be able to help either compile information or speak at the committee meeting. And so I think we should explicitly send out invitations to anybody who has served on phase 2, to our athletic director, to our grounds, and hear what they have to say about this. I think they're going to have a very valuable perspective.
I have reached out to the AD and I know she is available.
Excellent.
Next Friday.
And what's nice is if somebody can't make it, they can always record something or send something.
I have not reached out to Tim, but I can do that as well.
Tim had said he could be available.
Great.
But it might be helpful to, I mean, do we want a presentation on the information that has been collected?
I think that would definitely be valuable. Carrie, I feel like as, we put you in this advisory role, how comfortable are you with coordinating, getting something together? What help do you need?
I don't feel like I have a good sense of what needs to be done.
What needs to be done?
I really don't. I just shared with Steve the spreadsheets. I've compiled a lot of documentation, but I just don't have a sense of what that final product should be.
Yeah, I think this is where,
No.
I think this is the crossroads we get to on a regular basis.
Well,
So the question is, how do we move it forward so that Friday is a productive meeting?
Well, I am happy to work with people to prepare a presentation. I would like permission to reach out to the members of the Phase 2 committee.
Yeah, I don't even, how many members were there? 13, 14?
I think the students already graduated, didn't they?
And then, anybody on the committee, please email me what information you would need to be able to make a vote. I know we've done this in the past, but, times have changed. And then, it may come down to, some people might want to have information about, what would be the full costs of grass, whereas other people might say that the playability issue in the COVID era, when the best thing we can do is get the kids outdoors, that now trumps other things.
Yeah, the field won't necessarily be, hopefully the COVID era will be gone by the
Well,
time
I still remember my daughter, reminds me, Daddy, they told us we were going to go home for 2 or 3 weeks. And that was the last time she was in school last year. And so I hope the new normal is ending, but even if it does, we are still, for years, I think, going to be feeling the effects of COVID. And being able to be outdoors with good airflow, to have the kids doing physical activity away from screens. This is why I think now, more than a year ago, I think the playability issue has become even more important.
But then you have that.
So I was just going through minutes from the Phase 2 subcommittee, and the agenda for the December 9th, 2019 minutes includes review, design, and estimate for an engineered grass field option. But there are no meeting minutes, so it would be interesting to see what was the content of that discussion. That's certainly not anything that came back to the full school committee that I can recall. So
Sending them all right now.
Okay.
Joe, do you have anything in there about the Marblehead study?
I think I have that in my.
Did you read the Marblehead study?
Yeah, because it was presented at the public forum. That was one of the documents.
Read
that
it.
was
I'll
presented.
tell you what, just read the maintenance part of the Marblehead study,
Mhm.
and then tell me what you think. And then when you finish reading that, read the one about the Cape Cod study. And then do the one from the University of Washington too, okay? So we're gonna bring all these studies together then on the 16th in one document, all the studies that were done over the last 50 years of artificial turf? Or just the ones that prove a certain point in a certain way? I mean, if we're talking about doing documentation, we have literally 50 years. AstroTurf was put in 1974 in Astrodome. We have 50 years of studies. I mean,
Right.
Wait, since 74? That means I'm 50.
right, 1974 artificial turf started at AstroTurf in
I just got aged a bit.
1974. We talk about artificial turf for literally a half a century.
So I have a meta question. How many school committee members can talk to each other without violating quorum now that we're 6? Can you talk to one other person or 2?
It's the same as if we were 7.
Okay, so it's
Doesn't
still,
change.
you can talk to 2 people.
Mhm.
Because we have to just make sure that we do not have any deliberations going on where there is a chain of more than 3 people talking. I am glad Monday and Tuesday is a holiday next week at Williams, reading period.
Are the Marblehead study and the UW study, I'm just wondering if some of, I think we should be a little bit careful with like most of the studies on artificial turf versus grass are considering a crumb rubber field. And let's just make sure that we're not accidentally
Mhm.
bringing that into the picture.
And then I just want to make sure people can email me information that they want for the slides, and that will not violate any open meeting laws.
You're asking?
I'm asking. Because I want to make sure that we're not deliberating.
Well, I mean, I guess the first question is, are there questions that people have that are not already included on that athletic infrastructure questions spreadsheet? Because it may all
Right.
be there already. Because I took all the questions that were previously asked.
Right. And I think a lot of it is a coordination issue, is that this has been going on for so long and so many hands have been involved and it's been passed down.
Right.
As you've said, we've had 3 or 4 chairs, 3 superintendents,
Right.
that it's going to be time consuming, but I think a lot of it is there. And then the difficult thing is we have to decide right now, what are our priorities, what do we want to do?
Right, and is this the right time? Because the flip side to the argument of COVID, you need fields, is COVID, you shouldn't spend money. The message that we got from Hugh, which I don't, the tone aside, it's a message, it's a sentiment that is shared by a lot of people, that this is not the time to be investing huge dollars in an athletic field.
Right, but the flip side of that is this could actually be the time to get a good deal as people are looking for work. I know a lot of times the college uses this as an opportunity, and the gift has been used for expenses that it should not have been used for. It's been used for things that should have been part of the building project
Right, but
from
that's
day
a
one.
different.
No, but I'm saying,
argument.
when people make the argument that we should not be spending this money,
Mhm.
we need to push back and say we shouldn't have spent the money we already did. We shouldn't have spent the $3 million on the administrative multipurpose building, on the rent for the trailer, on all these studies.
Right.
That should have been sent to the towns. And if that had been the case, then it would be a completely different story right now in terms of how much money we have. And so we just have to remind people.
Could we also have, either in the slides or maybe Joe could present, like the financial options that we have, the state of what we have, the endowment and other options that we could use to help pay for the field, and be able to clearly
So
have that all laid out.
E&D, choice tuition,
Fundraising.
stabilization fund. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we're gonna stop the meeting, but if you're gonna go back, and I'm gonna bring Joe into this. When Joe was on phase 2, there was talk when we thought we had what we wanted in terms of a package, that we were talking about a whole athletic situation of both towns. We're talking about having a whole recreational committee going. We were talking about having major events here. So, and all of that came crashing down, okay, when people started saying, started bringing up but this has been, this was a very, very big, very ambitious project of a whole thing that can be done for not only both towns, but for the school. But that's why I say it's a community
Why
project.
did the communication with the towns stop?
Excuse me?
Why did the communication with the towns about?
What happened with that, we were doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then we started getting bombarded with these, whoa, what about this? What about that? And then people became defensive when we started answering questions, and then everything kind of fell by the side because we kept on answering these questions. Every time we asked a question, they asked 2 more. So then there were 3 more, and it went on, and all these plans that we had from an organized recreation program to fun, that was all stopped.
Yeah.
And we became.
And I guess, Al, it's a nice, I'm glad you said that, because it just reminds me of something that I think I've shared with some folks, but it would be really nice if we could get back to this being what it was meant to be, which is a great gift to the community, right? And that's something that Steve already said, that the Williams Capital Gift was meant to be, something that we could all celebrate. And I think the athletic infrastructure improvements, we all want it to be something that we all feel good about. And the sad part is that I think, again, Steve already said this, but no matter what we decide, not everybody is going to be happy with it, because if we decide on just going with compliance, there are going to be a lot of people very disappointed that we didn't do more. And if we decide to go with turf, or synthetic turf, there are going to be a lot of people very unhappy with this committee for many years to come. So it just feels like, I don't know, I think.
Well, I don't know if I would say it would be many people. There will be people who will be unhappy no matter what we do. But we are the ones who are elected. We are the ones who are supposed to be studying all the information and making the informed decision. And as you pointed out, we're not asking the taxpayers for money. We've actually used the Williams gift already to relieve the taxpayers of things that should have been sent to the 2 towns. And I think it's, right now when you look at what the children of the district have received from the Williams gift, the children of the district really haven't received anything. We've had administrative buildings, we've had storage facilities, we've had bathrooms built. It would be nice to have something where we bring people in. So I think at this point it's all been said.
Yeah.
And we're going to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be a 6-0 vote.
Okay, so, path forward. What are we doing? How are we collecting information that we can put together and present in some meaningful way on Friday?
Are Steve and Joe willing to work on something? I'm happy to help, but I just don't feel like I have the narrative fully in me.
And I think if we reach out to members of the community, and again, for anybody who's listening right now, if you have information, if you have concerns, please, bring it to our attention. And happy to have that. But I guess the thing that's really moved me the most tonight is when Al was speaking about how much money we're spending on studies rather than on items. And I just keep fearing that more and more what's going to happen is we keep investigating, that at some point we've done the investigations. We had a phase 2 committee that looked at what is going to be the best option for the district. And that committee was unanimous in artificial turf. Then there were suggestions from the community to go to natural grass, or if you're going to go to turf, how about the following, which would make it more environmentally friendly? And a lot of those were adjusted and adopted. But
Well, right, in the 5-2, there was a 5-2 vote of the committee that when we go back out with a new RFP, it should be bid in with alternates that would get numbers for all the different components.
in an ideal world, yes, but, oh, sorry.
And that was the charge back to the Phase 2 committee. And it appears there were some meetings in October and December of 2019 about how that could be structured. But the minutes are spotty on where that ended up. And we never really saw plans back from that. So it'd be really interesting to know what happened in those meetings and whether they ended up yielding plans that could be structured in a way for that type of RFP.
So how do we find out?
I don't know.
So
Well-
we need the minutes from those
Yeah.
meetings. And if there aren't any minutes, we need to ask Traverse what the last plans are that were talked about with them.
So I emailed the minutes.
Yeah.
I found them, I emailed them to you. We know that Steve,
Oh, right.
Al, John, Dan, and Lindsay were present. I can reach out to them to try to augment the minutes, and I can also reach out to Traverse and get the complete body of
Yeah.
their work in one place.
And it may very well be that idea that we bid this out and the different components doesn't work for some reason. Like, that's entirely possible, but that's kind of, I think, where things, as a committee, other than we're gonna have a forum and we're gonna go through these other different reformulations of the Phase 2 committee. But in terms of where things were with the project and its specs, that's where things seem to, the trail went cold.
Well, we have to decide how much money are we willing to spend to get information to explore different options.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is to see what information is already available.
Correct.
I think that's what
No,
without spending any more money.
Absolutely. But it may come to the point where we have to decide, is it worth spending more money, or do we have enough information? It would have been great to have had more, but do we have enough information that we can move forward? And, I'm happy to work with Joe and Kerry, and I will reach out to people who are on Phase 2 to see what information we have, and what information can we get, and what would the cost be of getting that information. Could we structure a bid?
Would it make sense for you to reach out to some of the more vocal opponents as
Absolutely.
well?
And, that's why I said right now, a few minutes ago, anybody in the community who has, concerns or issues, please, bring them to our attention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to, reach out to Stephanie, since she sent a public comment. I can reach out to Hugh as well. I'm happy to do that. I just want to be very careful because I don't want to speak for the committee. And that's why I want to just do it more as, I'm gathering information to coordinate a presentation to the committee. I don't want to discuss and debate. I
Right.
want to just gather information. What questions do you
Right.
have? What do you need?
And I think, again, if something is needed that is gonna cost money, that's something you can present to the committee.
Correct, and the committee might
So-
decide that we don't have enough information, or it might be that a majority of the committee decides, well, it would have been wonderful if we knew how much all these options would cost. Given the information we have, that's still enough information to act. And that's, when we create the agenda for the 16th, I think it's very important that we do make sure that we give ourselves the ability to have a vote on sending something out to bid.
Okay, how does everyone feel?
Still have a chance to say goodnight to my daughter.
Have we beaten this dead horse? Should we
Think
move
so.
on to the next agenda item?
Can I make just one last comment?
Sure.
This is probably the best reason that we should make sure we get this done now, so that future committees do not continue having these conversations again and again and again, starting from square zero.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda, upcoming meetings and events. Steve mentioned the education subcommittee meeting on 10/13 at 3:30.
3:30 p.m. by Zoom.
We have a school committee meeting remotely on Zoom on 10/22, and that's our reopening updates.
Is that going to be at 6 p.m.?
Yes. And then, as we have just discussed, we will have a meeting Friday, October 16th at noon, which will be purely to discuss the Fields project.
And that will be virtual.
That will also be virtual, yes.
Oh, the meeting on the 16th is going to be virtual?
Yes, sir.
Do we want to have that in person?
I would think.
Because
It's, I think it's really hard to coordinate the space
It's
for
also-
in person, and I personally can't come if we do it virtually. I mean, if we do it in person, it's very difficult.
It seems to be easier for people to participate if we're virtual.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, in
Okay.
terms of
So-
commenting
Right.
publicly, and, yeah. Okay.
The 16th at noon?
Yep. I will cancel
I do
class.
not have any other business, so do we have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Terranova moves, so I have a
Second.
second. Art seconds, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Aye.
wait, but just before we adjourn, you said discussion items. I just wanted to thank the administration, the teachers, everybody who worked so hard to get our kids back. I don't know if we explicitly said this before, but that work is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, we are adjourned at 9:07 p.m.
Officially vote? Okay.